Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 2024 edition of Category Management and Strategic Sourcing, presented by yours truly. And my name is Ian Gonzalez. A little bit about myself. Uh, there we go. I'm actually a mechanical engineer by education, and I did a few more studying. So in 2008, I got my executive MBA. I have a diploma in purchasing supply from the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, which is the UK's version of Supply Chain Canada. I also did business analytics at Harvard. 20 years in oil and gas, aviation, and chemicals manufacturing, mostly in supply chains. I've been through it all. I've been a buyer, I've been in inventory, I've been a strategic sourcer, I've been an advisor for category management. And most recently, I'm now an instructor for category management. Actually, I've been doing this for about 10 years, and I do that outside of my day job. And so there it is. I'm also an instructor at SAIT MRU, and this is my 10th year of teaching with the Supply Chain Canada. So I've been a professional development. In fact, I'm the longest running continuous instructor for Supply Chain Canada nationwide. And the Alberta chapter is very proud of that. And this is the most fun thing that I do. I actually have more fun teaching supply chain and analytic stuff than I actually do in my 9 to 5. So the picture over there, that's my wife and my two beautiful daughters. That was taken 2 years ago. The eldest one in kindergarten, and the youngest one is incoming kindergarten. And that's my email address if anybody has questions for me. I'm glad to answer anything. My area of expertise in supply chain, I would say, is supply chain analytics and data storytelling and reporting. And because I've been doing this for so long, actually teaching this particular course from that perspective, from somebody who's been measuring the performance of category management. I actually have seen through my years in very large oil companies and aviation what works, what doesn't work, and all those tips and tricks. I'm going to share it with you. This is a very practical course. It was originally designed as a 16-hour course. In with when SCC was still called Supply Chain Management Association of Alberta. We even offered this as a corporate training, and it was over several days. But for this iteration, we've condensed it into 8 hours, 4 hours, 3.5 hours today, 3.5 hours next Saturday. And so it's impossible really to teach you everything you need to know about category management and the sourcing. However, I've distilled it into what is practical and things that you can implement right now. Like after listening to me speak 3.5 hours, you will have tools, you will have knowledge so that you can make changes almost immediately. Okay. All right. So I'm going to turn off my video now because there's a lot of animation in what I'm going to show. So I just need the bandwidth for that. Does anyone have any questions about me? My background? Okay, you might have seen me also on LinkedIn and all these marketing materials. See. All right, so I have a few learning tips for you. There's a lot of golden nugget tidbits in this course. Have a pen and notepad. So if you see anything that gives you an aha moment, that would be really nice in my organization. Write it down. I find that if people take down notes, they remember things better and they ask good questions also. If anything at all is unclear, please raise your hand and ask me to repeat it. If I'm talking about something that doesn't match what I'm sharing on screen, for example, I'll be jumping from PowerPoint to Excel. If I'm referring to something on PowerPoint, but I'm still showing my Excel spreadsheet, sometimes that happens, let me know, okay? I don't want to go on talking about things that doesn't show up on screen. And most importantly, we all benefit from conversation. So if you want to share anything, please do. Just unmute yourself, right? And share. Don't bother to raise your hand in Teams because when I'm really in the zone, sometimes I can't see the chat or I can't see the raised hand. So unmute and stop me or share something. Okay. Here is what we're going to talk about this morning. So the 2 Saturdays are split this way. Category management this Saturday, next Saturday will be strategic sourcing. So we will start off with the category management process, how to categorize expenditures, designing a category taxonomy, a practical way to do that, how to create category and subcategory strategies, and what I consider the most important part of this morning, segmentation and tiering. There are a lot of elements to category management theory, but if for of all of the things that I've seen, all of this strategy writing, these tools to implement category management, nothing is more effective and culture changing than performing segmentation and tiering. And there's a wrong and a right way to do it, and we'll talk about that later on. So if you've seen me in previous webinars, you know I always like to start with a why. So I'll start now with, why would anyone want to go to category management? All right. And instead of showing you this in bullet points or words, I thought of making an animated graphic to clearly illustrate the point. When you're not doing category management, all right, and you're just, you're in a traditional transactional supply chain mode, or even you call yourselves a purchase department, it seems like a never-ending battle between supplier and buyer, always trying to get the bigger piece of the pie. And you use a lot of commercial tactics, negotiation, all the discounts, creative contract writing, that sort of thing. And it's a never-ending cycle, and that's what it feels like, trying to get one up over each other. With category management, it's no longer about how or who gets the bigger slice of the pie. It's about finding ways to increase the size of the pie, all right? And you're no longer focused on commercial aspects, all right? I mean, it's important, of course, price and costs are important. But when you think about things like mutual growth, innovation breakthrough, risk management, and collaborative cost reduction, it's less adversarial. And it's a true win-win, because you're enlarging now the value that both buyer and supplier gets. And that's my little cartoon there that in my mind is the easiest way to explain why you need to go to category management. You might be thinking, category management is so great, why doesn't everyone do it? The answer is simple. Category management isn't for everyone. It takes a lot of money, resources, and a paradigm shift in the way you manage the entire supply chain. And a lot of companies aren't just ready for that yet. Okay, so if you currently belong to maybe a small to medium company, all right, take caution in jumping, head first into category management, because it doesn't come cheap, all right? And even for those companies that can afford to do category management, you got the budget for the people and the processes. There's a very real threat that you might not. Some of you might be thinking, but we already manage categories. Doesn't that mean we already do category management? What I think, while management of categories is an important part of category management, there's much more to it than that. Okay, so let me reiterate that. Just because your SCM organization is divided into categories, it doesn't mean you're practicing category management. Is someone trying to speak on the mic? I heard something.
There's a question in the chat.
I'm under the impression that it was 14 hours over 4 Saturdays. Did I hear the 7? Yeah, I believe it's 2 Saturdays. Yeah, I'm not sure what Kathy's said, but this course is one Saturday for category management and another Saturday for strategic sourcing. I could be wrong, but we'll see. So yeah, I'll get back to you that time. Okay. The next part is a bit of a self-assessment. We have 4 on the course instruction from SEC. Oh, okay, all right. So maybe 4 Saturdays. I have to check my calendar on that. Well, If I'm wrong and this is actually 4 Saturdays and not 2 Saturdays, then I can put back the material I took out just to make this fit in 8 hours, and I can truly do the 16-hour course. Okay, my apologies for not checking. Okay, the next part is a self-assessment. Okay, so I will show you the areas of knowledge, function, processes, administration, people capacity of different phases of maturity of supply chain management organizations as defined by 3 large professional bodies for supply chain management. We have SCC, Supply Chain Canada from Canada. We have the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, which is where I learned most of my theory. That's from the UK. And then you have the American ISM, the Institute for Supply Management. And they all have very similar ways of classifying the maturity of supply chain management. And I will show you right now all 4 of them. And because this is not a face-to-face workshop, and typically this exercise, like we go from table to table and we score these things, for a webinar version of this course, I will just be just reading this, and then make an assessment on your own. If you have a paper and pen, you can score yourself. The way we do this is I will show you areas under the categories of knowledge, function, process, administration, and people capacity, and you simply just check if these things are happening in your organization. Okay, so for each check mark, if you're aware of it or not. So when you have a traditional or a transactional supply chain management department, and for knowledge, it takes too much time for me to read all of it. So I'll just read the ones I've highlighted. You should be able to segment your suppliers by material and services. Okay. The function of your department is to provide guidance to other business functions like operations and major projects on way to get the materials and labor to run the business. For process and administration, there are a lot of things over here, but basically when you're transactional, you have to understand and know when to use fixed pricing, lump sum, and a schedule of rates. Okay, the key performance indicator, the KPI, when you're doing traditional transactional, is delivery on time. In other words, that the business gets what it needs in terms of materials and services. It's not actually a focus. It is important, but when you're doing transactional and traditional, it's not easily something you can improve. Sometimes it's not something you can even track. Okay, essentially, because an organization that is so reactive, you just want to keep the lights on, but by making sure that you get the things that the business ordered. That's why it's delivery on time. The core skills of the people running a traditional SCM organization is to recognize, describe, and apply key transactional supply chain processes. So what are those? The creation of purchase requisitions, okay? And the transformation of that into purchase orders, which is sent out into to your vendors, and then processing the invoices when the work is complete. How to check that work is complete or materials have been delivered. Those basic supply chain skills. Okay, and in terms of negotiation, once you have basic negotiation knowledge and experience, you can run a transactional SCM. Okay, when you look at this list, all right, I'll give you a few more seconds. You know, keep in mind that it's okay if you actually don't know some of these. All right, I will show you later on how other classes have fared with this, and we've actually the real results of people who took this this checklist, and it's quite shocking actually. So anyway, so this is transactional and or a traditional supply chain management team department. Then you can evolve. You can become less a reactive organization and be more proactive and being more planful or strategic. Okay, so a strategic supply chain organization they use more analysis now to look at the internal and external forces that affect their sourcing. Okay, in particular, they use these common management techniques, Porter's five forces, SWOT, Pareto analysis, and environmental scanning, development of their strategy, and also in the act of sourcing. Okay, a strategic SCM has strategic sourcing processes and documents. Okay, their key performance indicator is no longer delivery on time, because they've got that all locked down. They know how to get that right. And now they can focus on something more important, cost saving. People call this cost reduction. Okay. The core skills of the people in the strategic SCM organization is the provision of advice and guidance to key stakeholders on the performance of organizational procedures and processes in purchasing and supply. Okay. For a strategic SCM organization to work, you have to have more advanced negotiation knowledge and experience. And add this to the list, basic financial skills. Okay, so people in your department should be able to differentiate between direct, indirect costs. They can perform break-even analysis, understand financial ratios, and estimating something called whole life costs. All right, so that's what this list more or less describes what strategic supply chain organizations have. Now you take all that, okay, and then you add on these things. Now you're into something called category management, all right? And it's the longest list by far. There's a lot of things that need to happen so that you can truly call yourself a category management organization. So in number one, I highlighted one of the most important things. You're not only tracking and measuring cost anymore. It's total cost, okay, of ownership, and it's well integrated into sourcing activities and contracts. When you talk about total cost of ownership, it's no longer sticker price or rate sheets. It's the cost of engaging with the supply from beginning to end. All right, and that includes things like maintenance costs, offboarding. Everything related to having a relationship with a vendor, not just buying the thing or paying the people for their services for that specific scope. It's the whole track life. Okay. This is interesting. The key performance indicator for category management is not cost savings. Okay, it's transformed into more meaningful. It's called value creation. Okay. For the people, okay, their skills is expert negotiation skills plus relationship management knowledge and experience. Okay, for category management to work, more than not, you have to be using an ERP system. Okay, so you can't possibly do category management if you're still on paper purchase orders, managing your expenses and tracking your activity with Excel spreadsheets. This is one of the reasons why category management isn't cheap. You have to invest in technology and people, right? And on top of financial skills, people in category management also have legal skills. Okay, they can actually write contracts on their own, all right? Or at the very least, they can understand elements of the contract rather than just issuing purchase orders. Finally, at the highest level, it's still category management, but what these professional bodies called world-class category management. Very few organizations on earth practice this, and I will show you some examples of those. Okay, in knowledge, okay, it's everything that I've described before plus this. Project management principles are integrated in sourcing and contract or supplier management. Okay, in simple terms, people who practice world-class category management, they treat sourcing activities as projects. Okay, it's no longer simple bidding activity. It's something with a definite start and end with milestones, with cross-functional teams. So that's the project management skill. For process and administration, I've highlighted that you not only know your risks, but you can quantify them. Okay, in various areas: financial, strategic, operational, hazard, and much more. Okay, the key performance indicator, I love this one. It's more evolved than value creation. It's something called ROSMA, the return on supply management assets. And the formula is deceptively simple. It's really just the sum of value creation divided by the cost of running a supply chain department. So it's no longer about just how much money you can save or costs that you've avoided, but that number has to be greater than of the salaries, the software licenses, everything to justify the existence of a supply chain department. Your value creation has to be greater than that. And you also track the improvement of ROSMA over time. Okay. And I love KPI because it's one of the greatest messages to say to senior management that supply chain is working. Okay. And for people who practice world-class category management, they have the ability to formulate direction and advice, change management, leading and influencing both internal and external stakeholders in procurement and supply and the management of teams and individuals. Okay, and don't worry if you were not able to take screenshots of any of these. I will give you a copy of the slides, and you can use this internally to where you think the maturity of your organizations is. Now, I promised you the past results. So we've been doing this for about years now at SCC, and we've been tallying the results. And mind you, what I will give you are the results, the aggregated results of people who were actually in departments called category management. Okay, so this is what we found out, that in the traditional transactional SCA skills, the processes, the knowledge, most people actually say that they only do 50 to 70% of that, right? Which was quite surprising to some, because people who considered themselves were already doing category management thought that they had this at 100%. But the truth is no. Okay, the percent meaning, I have it over subtext. It represents how much of the self-assessment lists were present in the response organizations. So only 50 to 70% traditional. Strategic, the number is even lower. Okay, 20 to 30% existed in all of the respondents. And category management, even though a lot of the people who took the self-assessment were in category management departments, they said they are only aware of or practice 5 to 15% of what they saw. And finally, it isn't surprising, world-class category management of all the things you saw on the list, 2 to 3%. Now, some people have said, okay, and these, when I say some people, some of these are actually consultants. They say that 50% of organizations that tried category management ultimately failed. All right. You know what? There's actually some truth in that. Okay, but let's bring that previous slide I show you, that category management isn't for everyone. And it's not true that willpower alone can get your supply chain department into a true category management department. It takes time. It takes money, people, resources, and entire change in culture. Okay, but this course will help you understand what needs to change today so that you can take first steps to becoming category management. Or if you think that you're in a category management department right now, maybe points to improve on, right? So you can maybe take a closer to world-class category management. Here's some points to reflect on. Okay, and you can unmute your mic if you want to share, or at the very least, just think to yourselves. Answer what industry do you belong to? Okay, and most of us, yes. Do you offer goods, services, or both? Where do we want to be as a supply chain organization? Because I can tell you right now, becoming world-class is not a practical thing to do for many companies. Right? To have a world-class category management department usually comes with being a world-class organization yourself, right? Are you willing to be or pay for world-class? Has the theory of category management changed, or have we just shifted our focus? For those people who've tried category management and are not seeing the benefits, I'll tell you right now, category management has existed for decades. It hasn't changed materially. right? There are the only new innovation happening from category management are the introduction of electronic bidding and now RPA and AI. But the theory itself hasn't changed in almost 30 years, 40 years actually, that the concept of category management has existed. Today, ask yourself, within the organizations you're in today, what is primary focus? Is it cost savings, value proposition, supplier relationships? Is there a balance between tactical work day to day with strategic work, or are you always putting out fires? Does the rest of the business trust the supply chain organization? How do you manage the workload with the business so that they know what to bring and what not to bring to the SCM organization? What is or should be our strategic vision? And finally, do we have clarity on our category strategies, if you even have them at all? Are they clear? My next section is called How Did We Get Here? You will appreciate more the purpose of category management when you understand why it was invented in the first place. So over 100 years ago, all right, your supply chain department looked like this, right? They didn't even call themselves supply chain management. They called themselves purchasing, right? And it was very common for these departments to be in central open spaces, have a lot of workers, and who process thousands of orders a day. But even at that ratio, that's on average 3 orders per person. That's how fast some work about 100 years ago in a purchasing organization. Okay, it wasn't very efficient, right? And in those days, every purchaser, right, they were expected to do everything, bookkeeping. They were also the accountants, relationship managers, everything. They had to do everything. And so it's not surprising that you can only pump out 3 orders per person per day. And then technology evolved. Okay, and now people realize it was more efficient to run your departments if you could separate labor from materials. And with technological advances like the telephone and fax machine, this allowed companies to process more orders, and that eventually meant accelerating growth for the company. Fast forward to around the 70s to 80s, as businesses expanded, purchasing officers found themselves processing orders for thousands of materials and services. All right, in less than 100 years, that 3 orders per day became thousands per day. And that led to the creation of subgroups of material services and hiring people with specific skills now and expertise for these categories. You were no longer back then, a jack of all that can buy any kind of requirement for the business. They were hiring people who were experts at certain services, experts at certain materials because they probably came from the industries or know the industry very well. They know the players, right? When that happened, okay, what was happening all over the world is there was now a better understanding of something called the value chain. And departments stopped calling themselves purchasing. They now finally call themselves supply chain management. The purchasers of old started calling themselves buyers. Category management, all right, is championed in the retail industry. Buyers became more innovative and realized that they could achieve better value through things like volume discounts and long-term contracts. All right. The picture I have over there is where no one can really prove where it started, but these were certainly one of the first guys that championed it. Okay. And today they are a world-class supply chain organization. Does anyone know what that is, that picture? What they're called today?
They're called Walmart.
Yeah, Walmart.
That's right. It's Walmart. Okay. And if you think about it, it totally makes sense. Walmart, they make pennies of profit on certain items. All right. They offer very, very low prices, and yet they're a billion-dollar company. The only way they can do that is to have one of the most efficient supply chain management companies departments in the world. And like I said, they pretty much invented the theory that goes into category management. And they do manage thousands of categories. Think of your own departments now. Maybe you have groups for 4, 5 categories, maybe. Well, Walmart had it for thousands. The next industry that adopted category management was the automotive industry. Their supply chain departments were now seen as players in driving operational efficiency and product quality. We're going beyond already what the supply chain organization was thought of doing, and they were now affecting KPIs. They were affecting operations now, and they were partnered with operations and getting production and revenue up. Category managers started to consider things like risk management and process automation. Today, modern supply chain exists in almost all countries. And the primary focus is the creation of value, which is achieved in many ways, like the management of environmental, social, and governance, the ESG factors, and relationships with suppliers. Category management is continuously being improved by technological advances like global networks, artificial intelligence, blockchain, and robotic process automation, or RPA. And if you're curious, who are the best of the best, okay, in 2023? Well, according to Gartner, they're a worldwide benchmarking consultant, very well respected one in Canada also. They have a list of about 20, and here are the top 5. Schneider Electric. They have a diverse and sustainable supply chain that operates in more than 100 countries. They have a program called Strive that aims to improve performance on 6 dimensions: sustainable, trusted, resilient, intelligence, velocity, and efficiency. So much more than just cost savings. Cisco, they have a dynamic and distributed supply chain that focuses on dual sourcing, supplier relationships, and disruption playbooks. They also have a strong commitment to reducing their greenhouse gas emissions and integrating sustainable initiatives. Colgate-Palmolive, they have a customer-centric and agile supply chain that leverages digital technologies, data analytics, and automation. Like Cisco have a goal to achieve net zero carbon emissions across their operations and supply chain by 2040. Johnson & Johnson, they have a resilient, responsive supply chain that can adapt to changing customer needs and market conditions. They also have a vision to deliver the healthiest supply chain in the world by 2024, which includes enhancing their ESG. Finally, PepsiCo, they're usually always on this list anyway. So they have a collaborative and innovative supply chain that partners with farmers, suppliers, customers, and communities. They also have strategies to transform their supply chain into a positive force for good, which involves reducing their environmental impact, improving their social responsibility, and creating shared value. And because you're going to get a copy of this slide, I'll include the link over here. So this will take you to a website that shows you the Gartner top 20 supply chain companies for 2023. And for each of the companies, it actually tells you why they were top supply chain companies. Does anyone have any questions on the evolution and the birth of category management? Pretty clear, huh? That when bots got more efficient, essentially, with their jobs, and they were processing more orders, in order for the company to grow, you had to start thinking of your work in terms of subgroups of materials and services, and that was the birth of categories. All right. So now, ladies and gentlemen, we'll show you the category management process. Okay. Some consultants will say category management looks like this. It's a 4-step strategy. Okay. Some say it's a 5-step strategy. Okay. The consultants say that category management is actually an 8-step cycle. I don't even know what this is, but it's out there. This is category management, another group. Okay, then you have other weirder diagrams that look like this. It's category management, it's a cycle, or it's a funnel. And are more ways of defining category management, but the truth is there is no consensus for one correct way of doing category management. But all of these diagrams, they have one thing in common. Deming or Shewhart cycle. Does anyone know what this is? The more common name for the Deming or Shewhart cycle.
It's a plan do cycle.
Absolutely. Yeah. Plan, do,
check, act.
That's right. If you've taken an MBA or management courses, you know that very well. So it's all just an interpretation of the plan, do, check, act cycle adapted for supply chain management. That's what category management ultimately is. Okay, so the PDCA cycle is a method used in business for the control and continuous improvement of processes and products. The control bit, that is to ensure measurable, replicable, and consistent application and allows for standardization. The continuous improvement bit is states that category management is a journey, not a destination. One where the organization learns from its mistakes and makes adjustments, okay, and rinse and repeat, all while increasing returns. So plan, do, check, act. The plan part is an assessment of what the business needs are and developing strategies to meet them. The do is, of course, the execution of these strategies. The check part is the performance measurement of the category management process. And that is reassessment or refinement of methods, strategies, and policies based on past performance and changing markets and business needs. So now I have a discussion point here, and here's where I'd like you to, unmute your mic and answer the question. The category management process is a PDCA cycle for STM. But what happens when the two elements of control and continuous improvement fail? What do you think? Go ahead, you can unmute your microphones now, share. I'll turn on my camera so you can see me. I have certainly seen the failure of both. Control
becomes very reactionary and firefighting and tactical.
The finger pointing starts.
Blame game, yeah.
Supply chain organization.
Fancy.
What else? When a so-called category organization does not really focus on continuous improvement, what happens?
Becomes stagnant.
That's right. It becomes stagnant. In particular, the value you've generated in the past stagnates. Right? You get diminishing returns. Right? And proper category management, if done properly, the value gets bigger and bigger. Remember the size of the pie increasing. When that stops to happen, right? And you plot the value created and it's getting less and less every year. That's a sure sign that you're focusing on the wrong things, and that continuous improvement, all right, is simply not there. You like the idea of category management, let it run for a few years, but you're not checking if things are working, or you're not innovating or changing with the times. So control, continuous improvement is vital to the success of a category management group. Let me now show you the 5 pillars of category management. Okay. You have market intelligence, demand and supply planning, category strategy and sourcing, supplier relationship management and contract management, which together support supplier performance management. And that's what holds the house up. So this is your 5 pillars of category management, right? They all must be present. The lack, underperformance of one of these pillars brings the whole thing down. And if you look at this through the lens of organizational design, this is what it might look like. Okay, you have there. I changed the names, but these are the 5 pillars. On the top, the start of the title, you develop analytics and market intel. Okay, it all starts with data, actually. So in that step, you determine and reassess your business requirements. You determine the market intel reporting framework. You gather and analyze historical spend data. You create and manage long-term forecasts. You update your category taxonomy, and you present your findings and recommendations. A lot of organizations, they're dead in the water at step 1, because even though experienced purchasers or buyers, they simply don't have the horsepower to do analytics. And so without the very first step of understanding supply and demand needs, you cannot start category management. But let's say you have that. You hire enough analysts who can do both descriptive and predictive analytics. Okay, with the recommendations that come from the analytics team, now you can develop a category profile and category and subcategory strategies, where you in that process you determine the risks, you determine category opportunities, you perform, for me, what is the most important process, segment tiering, you determine sourcing opportunities, and you determine contract and supplier opportunities. From there, you can now develop your sourcing approach. Okay, so your sourcing strategy, negotiation strategy, and you pre-qualify suppliers. After that, you execute your approach to market, and that's where you conduct your RFQs, RFPs, RFIs. In that step, also you shape and negotiate agreements and develop your request for approval of expenditures. That you onboard the suppliers. All right, so that's where you define performance and your interaction framework. All right, setting the rules for managing your relationship. Okay, and you implement your relationship together. And while it's going on, you manage the contract. Okay, so you assess contract performance, mitigate the risks, you manage things like warranties, you resolve contractual issues, and in general you manage the contract, the agreement. Alongside managing the agreement, you also manage the relationship itself. Okay, so we look at supplier performance. You evaluate supplier relationship. You evaluate a SRM or supplier relationship management program. Manage supplier issues and risks, and you evaluate and improve the supplier relationship. All right, and all agreements have an end date. So if it comes to that, you properly offboard supplier. You don't just let them go. And that all that data it goes back into analysis to see where things have gone right, where things can be improved, and the cycle starts all over again. Now, for everyone on the call who is a manager, a director, or somebody who has some influence in organizational design, I want to show you something really cool. This process flow diagram is useful in many ways. Because it not only establishes the processes for category management, but this can actually be a basis for organizational design. All right, you want to become, a category management department. Now, looking at this, you can figure out how many FTEs are required. Okay, it is also a diagnostic tool to find areas to focus when things go wrong. So, someone is the chat. Yes, Cherry, we'll get a copy of the entire slide deck. So yeah, you'll get this diagram. Okay, so it's not, again, it's as I was saying, it's not just a process flow. This can be the basis for how you design the organization and hire people and determine what skills are required. Because this is it. This is the entirety of the category management process flow. And remember the Deming-Shewhart cycle. There's your plan, the analysis and development of the category strategy. There's your do, the execution of your strategy in the market. There's your check, right? Managing the contracts and managing the relationship. And the act is feeding that all back into step 1, okay, where you iterate and you improve what needs to be improved, correct what needs to be corrected. Plan, do, check, act. And all of that flow nicely back into the original 5 pillars of category management. There they are again. I wish the animation was a little bit slower. It is when I'm not online, but now that I'm streaming, it's a bit choppy. But there you have it, folks. You'll get a copy of this, so it's really it's a nifty thing you can show management at your own company, is that, hey, we lack this certain function, or we need to build ability in this area. Any questions on the 5 pillars of category management and the process diagram? Okay, I'll take your silence as, yep, it's pretty clear to me. All right, next, let's talk about categorizing expenditures. Categorization processes typically start with costs. All right, and as a first way of doing this, you can think of costs as something that can be categorized according to how they relate to the organization's level of activity within a specified period of time. The length of time influences which category a given cost falls into. So in real terms, costs can be considered variable, fixed, semi-variable, and step costs. Okay, let's look at that a little more closely. All right. So variable costs are costs which depend directly on the level of activity. Whenever the activity level changes, so do the costs. Examples: raw materials, labor, utilities. The more you produce, the more raw materials and labor you need. Right. The more you produce, the more you consume water and electricity, utilities. Then you have fixed costs which are not affected by changes in the level of activity, like, for example, rent and insurance premiums. They do not go up or down with your output. There are also semi-variable costs, costs which have both a fixed and variable element. And then there's this one that a lot of people don't actually think about. It's very real: step costs. Okay, these are fixed for certain increments. Okay, so when a certain range of workload changes, all right, these costs will abruptly change after crossing a certain threshold level. For example, software licenses. When a certain threshold is crossed, like the number of users, what you used to pay on a monthly basis suddenly goes up, right? And software license is one of the examples. There are actually many things that companies deal with that are not variable, all right, but they're actually step costs. How about another way of categorizing expenditures? Costs can also be categorized according to how strongly they can be attributed to specific purposes, how strongly linked they are to certain activities. So for this way of dividing costs, you have direct and indirect costs. Okay, so direct costs are directly linked to a specific unit or aspect of an organization, such as a person, product, service, department, or location, and they are quicker back to the cost object. So common examples are direct labor and materials, the ones that actually are producing or repairing or performing the work. Then you have indirect costs or overheads. So these are the costs that are spread over a number of identifiable unit aspects. These are costs that cannot be identified directly with specific products or services. So there's your rent, administrative, safety, management, labor, and even office supplies. There's a third way. Costs can relate to the delivery of the organization's products and services, whereas others are part of the expense of running the organization. So you have product costs and period costs. Right, this is not super popular, but define it. Product costs. These are costs identified with the organization's products and services. So prime cost of production, that's the sum of all of the direct costs, all right, from the previous slide. And then you have production overhead costs, the total of all the indirect costs. Okay. And then you have period costs. What are these? These are costs treated to expenses incurred during the period, all right, a fiscal year, for example, and not related to the product or service delivery. Like, for example, SG&A, sales, general, and administrative costs, marketing expenses, office depreciation. Okay, they're not directly related to the products, okay, but they are required to run the business, run the organization. Whichever way you decide to break down your costs, or maybe you're mature to do this, to do all three of them, this rule certainly applies. The Pareto principle, the 80-20 rule. The Pareto principle applies to the categorization of expenditures, and it says that 20% of your suppliers will account for 80% of your spend, 80% of your time and effort, 80% of your volume supplied, and 80% of value added. Supply falling in that 20% of what or whatever category your organization considers important, they're called key suppliers. So let's plot this on a chart. On the vertical, we have spend by value, okay, as a percentage, right? And then you have on the bottom, you have the number of suppliers. If you did that with your organizations today, regardless of what kind of supply chain organizations you have, you will likely see something like this, where 80% of your spend by value, the percentage, belongs to a small number of categories. You only have a handful of big ticket items, right? Big ticket, super strategic partnered suppliers, the ones where you spend tens of millions of dollars with. You don't have a lot of that. You only have a handful. To get that extra 10% of suppliers, you have another group of suppliers. For that extra 10% of suppliers only account for an extra 10% of value. And finally, to get to 100%, have the majority of the remaining suppliers. 70% of your spend items are actually low value items. Okay. And I love the Pareto principle because it's a great way of dividing workload, of thinking about work prioritization. All right. You get easily overwhelmed if you think of your vendors in absolute terms. Like, I have 2,000 vendors to manage. But if you think of the Pareto principle and you add the analysis, you did the math, out of those 2,000 vendors, you're probably only really managing 10 or 20 of them, the ones that you meet every month. And the rest are such low risk, low spend vendors that they really don't warrant a lot of management time. And then suddenly now your workload becomes a lot easier. Okay, the next topic is designing a category taxonomy. Does anyone have any questions on how to think of categorizing expenditures? There are three ways of doing this. And I'm going to guess that all of you on the call here are doing some version of one of the three. Myself, I've never been in an organization that does all three. At least not at supply chain. The finance department has the ability to report on the ways of categorizing costs, but at supply chain, it's one or two ways. All right. So now you decide that, all right, I can do these things. I will invest in the analysis. I will learn all about strategic sourcing and supply performance management. How now do I design this thing called a category taxonomy, right? Maybe some of you have heard this, others who are still in traditional procurement organizations, maybe this is something new to you, but let me explain what it is, why this is central to category management theory. Category taxonomy actually comes from biology, right? It's just borrowing from the natural sciences. So in biology, when you say the word taxonomy, it's the science of defining and naming groups of biological organisms on the basis of shared characteristics. Okay, this next part is very important. Give order to what could be a chaotic and disorganized system of classification. Modern taxonomy has adopted a binomial naming system. Binomial means two. So you have in the natural world, you have genus, species. In the supply chain management world, we take inspiration from biology by classifying or categorizing materials and labor into two specific levels: category and subcategory. All right. For many of you who've been working in a more progressive supply chain organization, this might seem natural to you that everything needs a category and subcategory. But for those of you that haven't, right, and certainly even in my current organization, they only go as far as just category and say that we don't need a subcategory or that's too complicated. But let's discuss that, all right? You can unmute your mics now if you want. Why not go down to a third like subcategory or even fourth level, like the commodity level itself, to get more specific? Why doesn't everyone do that? Stick to just two. Because a lot of companies have certainly tried, and I've been in some that have gone down to like level 5 with categorization.
I think just the time involved is an issue. Like, you just need a lot of time.
Yep, time is one factor for sure. It's difficult to create a taxonomy that goes more than 2 levels. But what else? What's more important than time, at least in the sense of implementing category management?
Resources earlier.
That's right. Resources, people. If you create too many levels, you're going to need people to manage all of this, right? Because whether it's category management or not, if you have groups or categories that don't have any accountability, there's no name attached to it, it fails, right? So what is recommended is you have at least 2 levels, category and subcategory. If you are a large organization and you're willing to maybe specialize and hire people for it, go right and go to the 3rd or 4th level. But it is certainly not something that companies need to do. Should category taxonomy be linked to organizational structure? This one I want to hear from you. Okay, because I heard it from both sides. Should it be linked to organizational structure? Meaning, okay, I'll just give you an example. If there are 5 categories of materials and services, you should have 5 teams managing that. You have 8 categories, you need 8 category managers, category directors or something.
Not necessarily.
Why?
The
Depending on
demand
the
might not
complexity
be
of
there
the
to
category.
support.
I heard 2 people. I heard the word complexity, which is right. It depends on the complexity of the categories. Okay.
And I guess the demand too of the category of not every category will have the same requirements in the company.
That's right. And so you can have, on the basis of management, a team that manages 2 related categories.
I would add to the continuity of the business. If you have one person managing one category and they leave, that's a lot of knowledge to take with them too. So maybe I'm thinking more of the organizational health versus the need for one person to manage one category at a time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely right.
Also, deviation of processes.
Oh, you mean more teams, meaning more deviation?
Yeah, potentially.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, it's something that needs to be guarded by the leader of maybe category management. The category management doesn't work. There's no standardization, but you're absolutely right. Too many people, too many teams, you have that risk. Categories doing things their own way, right?
Could also be your resourcing. If you're just starting out, you may have identified all the categories, but you may want to start with just a few categories where you implement it and then grow it organically and, prove the concept first.
Exactly.
Before you just implement it full blown across the organization.
Yeah, it's a very practical way of approaching it. Yeah. My next question is very tricky. Should there be a 1-to-1 ratio between supplier and category, meaning there's going to be one category or subcategory for each supplier? 1:1. You think that's best practice?
No.
To me, no.
Okay.
No way. No way.
For those of you who said no, why not?
Very inefficient.
Way too expensive.
Very expensive.
There is also. There is
How
a
is
risk.
it expensive? It's just data. We're just classifying. Let's say you're managing this supplier. We just categorize him that in one category. Why would it be expensive?
number of
Multiple
people that
resources.
you'd be hiring.
Sorry?
If you've got 2,000 suppliers you're managing, like you mentioned earlier, and you said, okay, each of those suppliers is going to have a person managing them. That would
Well, not a
be
person, but
a lot.
a category. It's like you have, let's say, 6 categories of materials and services. Every supplier is tagged to only one of them. I'll tell you
Okay,
now.
I think you're asking a different question.
A lot of organizations do that. For simplification purposes, there's a one-to-one relationship. I want to hear the pros and cons of this.
We have suppliers that span across many different categories. So taxing would be different, contracts would be different, experts would be different. So to group them all together would mean that we weren't really doing the best at what we do.
Okay, so that's for the case of not doing it 1:1. All right. Would there be an issue with, let's say, reporting? When a supplier that supplies multiple categories of things is just lumped into one? Actually, I can answer that. Of course, there would be a problem because now you're inaccurate. The person who provides 3 kinds of products, really saying he belongs to just one kind. It's like almost hiding the others in both one, right?
Yeah, it has to be devised internally somehow so that your reporting would be distributed properly.
Mm-hmm. But now, here's why this is a trick question. I kind of agree that somehow categorization should be linked to organizational structure. Wouldn't there be a conflict then that if a supplier is categorized in multiple groups, who manages that supplier now? Right?
Sometimes you just have to pick a key person that manages that relationship.
And that's a common tactic that organizations do. They just pick the category with the biggest spend, and that's the one who's going to manage that vendor. Here's my thought, and this is coming. I won't say that this is the right answer or wrong, but I've seen it both ways. I've seen companies 1:1. In fact, more companies do that than those who don't. And the more organizations, the one who've got the horsepower for data and analytics, they're able to break down every supplier by exactly what they provide. So if a supplier is a conglomerate and they provide materials and services, then they have 2 or more categories to that supplier. It's a lot harder to do, but they do it. Where I stand on this is that I think you should do both. So thinking now, not anymore about categories, but the purpose of categorization. All right, and this is where my reporting background comes into play. If the focus of, let's say, improving the supply chain, and the report is about exactly what did we buy last year, all right, you're tracking our consumption of materials and services, then every supplier, in my opinion, should be broken down to exactly the categories they provide. So if one supplier has 5 categories of materials and services, then that's how you categorize them. They actually belong to 5 different buckets, all right? Otherwise, you will be highly inaccurate on your reporting of materials and services. But on the other side, this is why I say it's both. Category management is also about managing suppliers, not just reporting on what you bought in a given period of time. It's about relationship management, and it is very difficult to maintain a healthy relationship when a supplier is talking to multiple people. Right? Usually it's one person or one team that negotiates and implements a contract. So if now you tell a supplier, well, because you have multiple products and dealings with us, multiple contracts, you will be managed by 4 different teams. It's certainly not the way to do that. Okay, and category management falls apart if you even try to do that with your suppliers. So for the lens of management of relationships and contracts, every supplier should actually have one person or one team tagged to them. All right. So it's if you ask me, this is not a one or the other. I'm just saying do it for both. You just have to know the purpose of why you're categorizing it. Again, if it's for reporting or analyzing what you bought or what you're spending money on, then you have to get as granular as possible. All right. So that also that spend matches the financials. But if it's about managing people, managing suppliers, one supplier to one team. That's the best way you can approach relationship. Whoever negotiated the contract, whoever implemented it, is the one that they will always speak to all the way to the end, and you're not changing hands. All right, frequently. All right, think about, let's say you were a homeowner, you bought a brand new home. All right, how angry would you be if here, let's say you're always speaking to a different electrician, a different plumber. You don't have loyalty because they keep changing on you. Well, that's how suppliers feel like when you keep changing the relationship, or you tell them that you will be managed by 5 different teams because of your 5 different products. That's where I stand. Okay, next. Oh, sorry, back. Should category taxonomy be static or dynamic? What do you think? Semi-trick question.
Probably static, because otherwise reporting wouldn't work.
Okay, all right.
Maybe dynamic, but it could change every sorry, there's an echo, every couple years or so, depending on your reevaluation.
Okay, I like that answer. All right, so where I stand is it should be dynamic, but not too dynamic that you can't manage it. So it should change with the changing times, right? Because vendors do change their offerings, and the world does change, the terminology. But you can't do this very often, right? I think best practice is once every year or once every other year. You certainly do not change your taxonomy every month or every quarter, because that is too difficult to manage people-wise. So a set period, yes, exactly what's in the text. That's exactly what I feel, right? The dynamic taxonomy with set interval review. Okay. So thank you all for participating in that little discussion. Now let's talk about how do we do this. For those of you that don't have a taxonomy yet, I offer you some. The United Nations Standard Product and Services Code, UNSPSC, is a taxonomy of products and services for use in e-commerce. All right. It is a 4-level hierarchy. So category, subcategory, 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 as an 8-digit number with an optional 5th level adding 2 more digits. So version 16, released in 2014, contains over 50,000 commodities. And you can download this for free anytime. In this slide that I will all of you, there's an attached PDF. It's not the latest version. It's version 16. I think it's the current version is 20 something, but it's a good starting point. All right, so you don't have to develop a taxonomy from scratch. You can actually use something that many companies are already using. All right, and 50,000 commodities, there's a very good chance, right? Unless you're in the tech sector and you're a startup providing something that people have never seen before, there's a very good chance that your company is producing materials and services requires materials and services in one of those 50 in that 50,000 commodities. Now, there are pros and cons to using UNSPSC. So the pros: if you're building or refining your taxonomy, it's a great place to start. The logical groupings of commodities makes for easier analysis and management of costs. Also, and this is for this reason, I'm a big fan of UNSPSC. It allows you to do benchmarking with peers and competitors in your industry. All right, if customized too much, well, in the act part of the plan, do, check, act cycle, PDCA cycle, how will you know if you're doing well. You can't compare yourself against peers and competitors if you use a highly customized taxonomy. Using UNSPSC allows you to compare, your category performance with others who are also using the UNSPSC. Also cons to adapting this technique. Although this taxonomy was intended to be comprehensive and detailed, it may not include all relevant categories for your organization. So there's still some work. It's not something that's plug and play for everyone. So you need to do some rationalization, and some analysis is still required. I'll give you an example. When version 14, I believe, was released, all right, and my past company wanted to use taxonomy, they discovered that UNSPSC doesn't have codes for oil sands kind of work. And in Alberta, a lot of the oil companies here, Cenovus, Suncor, Husky, Syncrude, Shell, their business is traditional oil. They don't drill for oil under the ground. They mine oil sands. And back then, the UNSPSC had nothing on oil sands. So only partly used the UNSPSC. So there is that problem. Okay, it's not perfect. Okay. Len makes a good comment here. Says he agrees. Why invest time creating the wheel if this one can fit your organization? Absolutely, right? Get, of course, the benefit of benchmarking. Now, with that, I will present to you the first that I'm going to give all of you. So it's an Excel spreadsheet called the category that I developed specifically for this course. All right, so let me demo to you how it works. And for those of you who have an inkling towards analytics, you'll like this. Okay, so let's say you are able to pull data for the things that you're buying. Okay, maybe you have an ERP system, maybe you're doing this in spreadsheet, but you can generate a list of the stuff you buy. Okay, and here's an example. All right, and these are MRO, or maintenance, repair, and overall materials. So you've got bushings, things, and flanges and pipes, gaskets. And all of this comes from an ERP system. In this particular example, it's SAP. Okay, SAP outputs data that looks like this. Okay, and if you do this, you will quickly realize that if you are a medium to large company, that every month you have tens of thousands of lines, and it quickly becomes very, very overwhelming. How now can one person make sense of all this? How do I categorize it? So I developed a tool so that all you got to do is go to this tab called Taxonomy Keywords. All right, and then you input your categories and subcategories here. So let me zoom in and I'll show you. This is all an example, by the way. You might have a category called equipment and machinery and MRO. Okay, and under that category you have subcategories for gloves, canvas bags, compression oil, hoses, laboratory chemicals. To use this tool, you just have to type in keywords. All right, so that's such that if these keywords appear in the text, all right, and this is not case sensitive, all right, like bleed valve. You see the word bleed valve, well, then that purchase order should be classified as compression oil in equipment, machinery, and MRO. Or if something says blower, has the word blower in it, then it stands in blower. All right, and you can add rows to this. It's a simple Excel table. So you can have another category for input materials and chemicals, and then you have keywords for those also. All right, if I don't have it here, but this is just an example. You might have a category for IT, transportation, logistics, whatever, professional service. Then you just write keywords, and in this little tool, I've made space for 100 keywords, which is it's a good place to start. Okay, you just fill in the table, all right, and then when it's time for you now to make your report on what we're spending on last month or something, you just hit this button called categorize. It will cross-reference all the elements here with the words on this sheet and categorize it accordingly. So let me show you how this works. So hit categorize. Okay, takes only a few seconds. There we go, 3.96 seconds, categorization complete. And now we see which ones are MRO, sorry, which ones are pumps, which ones are screws, right? And of course, it's not going to get it right all the time. So there's a little function here where we can find the uncategorized stuff. You click the button. All right, so all of these weren't classified. So what you do now is take a look and say, okay, this thing over here with the word cooler, I'll take that cooler and then I will add it to my keywords. Okay, I'll put it over here. Okay, cooler's probably not hoses, but or I create another subcategory and then you just run it again. Okay, so I clear the filters and then I can run it again. If I run again, now anything with the cooler will be classified under that. So you set it up so that it matches your industry, your business. You create as many categories as your organization will allow, or what is practical, and then the subcategories. You put as many keywords as you want. Okay, and then this nifty tool will auto categorize it for you. Okay, I created this out of a need because several years ago, we needed my company. We needed to report on spend on categories. And it wasn't something the ERP could do. You're in your ERP, you're like, SAP or Oracle, you can get purchase order, you can get requisition, you can see invoice information, you can see vendor number. There was nothing there about how things were categorized, at least nothing that matched my company's way of categorization. And so out of that frustration and manually do VLOOKUPs every month, I said, I'm going to create an automatic tool where I just maintain my database that I'll review maybe once a month, make sure these keywords are still okay. And then in like what you saw, in 4 seconds, I can get the full report on my categorization. And then if you want, you just paste the spend right beside it. And then now you can make your pretty dashboards ever. So this is the first tool that I will give all of you. So when I send out these slides, it comes with this this little Excel file. And it's an Excel file. There's nothing special about it. So it should run in all of your computers. Now, I will say that this is macro enabled. So if your IT department blocks macros, unfortunately, this will not work for you. But if you have the ability to enable macros, right, and usually that's just a function of going to your options, and then there's something here for a trust center, right, allow macros, then this thing should work. There are no viruses in here. I built this one. It's not something I downloaded. It's on the black net or something. So I built the code, and I'm giving it to all of you now. Okay, any questions on taxonomy? And essentially how you can get going on this, right? You don't reinvent the wheel. Use UNSPSC, and then to actually operationalize, use tools like my little category, my categorizer, that you can quickly categorize stuff. Okay, if no questions, I'd like to give you all a quick 10-minute break. It's 10:20 now. Let's meet back in 10 minutes, 10:30. You can grab a snack or a drink, but I will stay behind if anybody has questions. And turn on my camera while I'm doing that.
Hi, Ian. Good morning. Great job, by the way. Thanks. Very enjoyable discussion.
Oh, thank you.
And I was wondering if you, during the course, you touch upon some of the challenges of implementing the category management strategy, especially when you want to go from quite a tactical arrangement to something much more strategic, and the barriers to all of, achieving that integration and new way of working.
I will certainly touch on something like the very next topic, segmentation. I will show you how it has actually failed in certain companies and where it's so easy to get it wrong.
Yeah, right. Good. Great, thanks. Yeah.
And if you have questions, if you have questions specific on how strategies don't work or something, ask me, because one of the reasons I'm teaching this course is I've lived this. For most of my time in these large companies, I've been through category management, and I've been through its infancy. I've been through mature ones. And as somebody who measures performance of category management, I know where it fails, and I've seen it work and not work.
Cool. Yeah, very cool. Thank you. Yeah, look forward to getting into that detail. Thanks very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, and I just wanted to touch base. I'm a late joiner. I didn't get the link this morning, but Ian, I had sent you an email that I didn't get the link, but I got it.
Okay, yeah.
I think one of the challenges that I'm going through right now, it's a $12 billion organization that was very decentralized. And now we're trying to implement category management, and it's extremely different, going through acquisitions. And even after the acquisitions, I mean, we're trying to merge 4 or 5 different companies, as well as, legacy reporting and all that. So it's been extremely challenging. I mean, even printers, we have 5 different printer companies and completely different durations of lease contracts, and trying to streamline all of that. How do you define? Because right now, my role is getting very, very, very blurred. I'm supposed to be category management, facilities, and real estate, but it's getting blurred between being a purchaser and actually becoming the manager of the categories. Say printers, for example, I'm not responsible for moving fleet. I'm responsible for trying to come up with the strategy to do it and roll that downstream. But what's your experience in the role of a category manager becoming blurred with that of a purchaser, or that of completing the actual tactical work when you first implement it? Because I'm sitting here, I'm this isn't my job. It's not my job to move printers for you. It's my job to tell you what to do or recommend for you what to do. That's where it's getting really frustrating right now, because those lines are so blurred.
And that's an issue. One of the hallmarks of category management is the people in category management do not actually do transactional SEM. You do not create POs. You do not deal with day-to-day. You're solely focused on strategy and thinking about 3-5 years ahead of you, not what's not available tomorrow. So if you're experiencing that today, there's clearly a manpower issue, or leadership is not very clear in what a category manager does.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. And I don't know if anybody I think it's just because we are in the infancy. It was very decentralized purchasing, and now we're going in and trying to tie all of these loose ends up and make sense of all of this random data, different company names, different contracts, everything being signed at an office level, and it's literally all over the place. So I'm really excited to see what tools will be available in this presentation and the future ones, because right now we don't have the tools, we don't have the reporting. It's starting from the ground up and trying to build this for a $12 billion organization. It's insane.
For your specific example, I can hear another problem, because you've got this mergers and acquisitions, and different companies, I'm assuming, have different ways of doing things, maybe different payment terms, different terminology for categories, different vendors doing all the same thing. Remember the first pillar of category management. What makes it all possible is data and analytics. So you cannot actually implement strategy categories if you cannot clearly define, your categories and your spend in each, and you cannot identify where overspend happens. Right? You have no hope of rationalizing vendors if you don't have a standard way of reporting on all of them, and that's very difficult during an integration period where you're not only going from transactional to category management, but you're also realigning different business entities. It's very very difficult. I feel for you, but if it were me, if I was the general manager of SCM, I would give you more horsepower on data and analytics first.
Well, and that's of what I've been tasked with is obtaining that data and analytics. And it's like, it's insane because it's so many different companies, legacy ERP systems that I don't have access to. Like we're
Wow.
merging everybody into Oracle. 2 of them happened in July. A third one just happened a couple of weeks ago. So even legacy experience, we're having to rely on our suppliers, not so much on our own data. Have to rely on the suppliers' data because it's all that history internally is not available.
That's serious. That's serious. It's a failure to launch of category management if you had data.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I'll get specific here. When it's something that big, so a $12 billion company, and I'm sure you have big ERPs, and you say they have different ERPs. The kind of skills you need for that is not your everyday business analyst or dashboarder. I think you're going to need to hire data engineers.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it was completely out of my scope. I have such a strong purchasing background, and then trying to actually implement a full-on category management strategy and program is like, I'm like a hamster in a wheel. You know, like I can go, but actually get something done and actually be able to be like, this is my strategy. It's been very difficult. So this is great timing for this course to come up, definitely. I even paid for it myself. My work didn't even approve it.
Hopefully, I will give you evidence to show your leaders that it's non-starter if you have bad data, and if you're still focused on the day-to-day, you can't. A large company like yours, you cannot do category management, at least not you own.
Yeah, definitely. No, I'm glad this crew is likely probably sympathetic to my situation and maybe experiencing the same challenges.
Definitely been through what you're describing. Is this Melanie?
Yes.
Oh, hi, Melanie.
Hi.
Hi, yes, definitely been through. And I was just chatting with Ian just a few minutes ago, asking him if we're going to get into some of those subjects of resistance to change and change management when implementing a category management strategy. And so there's a very strong parallel to change management, and change management itself has a series of stages, steps, and cycle, a Deming type cycle. So there's some real strong pieces from change management that would assist you, I think, in terms of identifying where you're at in the stages of change and what are the barriers to implementing a successful CM strategy.
Definitely. I mean, it's kind of at the point, and maybe it's a little too personal, but I'm like, I want to look for a new role because this is too difficult.
Right. Yeah, it can. And you need support. You need to get those supporters that are at the C-suite as well as, closer to your function. You need that support network, and creating successful change is about creating those linkages to the various change agents, supporters, and voices that can sit at various tables and support the initiatives and support difficult decisions that need to be made, whether those are financial decisions about investing in infrastructure, resources, systems. And Ian mentioned one great example is when you've got to get data from multiple ERP systems, and that data is in different formats. It's got different levels of cleanliness or complexity. You need some real expertise there.
It's like that data is not available. Everybody's decentralized, like purchasing decentralized. Contracts are being signed at an office level that we don't even know what they are. I'm like, how am I supposed to plan off of this? Like, and my boss like, oh, here's a category, run with it, come up with a strategy. And I'm like, duh.
Yeah, they're trying to leap ahead is what it sounds like. And if I'm just standing back a little bit, trying to kind of view the helicopter view of what you're going through. And sometimes I think it's a good idea to stand back and kind of look at that, give it that helicopter view of where we're at and what we're trying to do, and why we're not successful in achieving that is because there's some real fundamental issues not being addressed through change management. So when you try and implement category management and you haven't addressed those key barriers and complexities, then change is not going to be successful. That implementation is not going to be successful. So there's some very real I think tools that can help you, and building a successful change team involves putting a multifunctional, multi-level change team together, so you've got the right levels of support to integrate that change.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome.
And Carolyn Kosh also says something for you, Melanie. She said that she's also in sales there, and she's working with the bare minimum of data and try to implement category management with that. Oh wow. It goes back to one of the first few slides I showed all of you, that not everyone is ready for category management. It's expensive. It requires a lot of people and time and expertise that many companies don't have. I just mentioned data engineers. Who has a department of data engineering except the biggest companies in Alberta, right?
Hi, Ian.
Hi, Carolyn.
Actually, it's interesting because I work for the Workers' Compensation Board of Alberta, and we actually do have a lot of data engineers that could, we have horsepower for that. But
Okay.
I think the biggest issue is trust. We have to be trusted in order to, take all those other steps. And you said that mentioned that in an earlier slide, that you have to have the purchasing, procurement, and supply chain management people all have to have the trust of the organization behind them before they can move ahead with this stuff. And I'm at that step right now, and it's difficult.
Yeah. Baby steps.
Yeah.
Where I am right now is my company is throwing money at data engineers and data professionals to get the data into a workable state. It's horrible right now. But at the same time, they want to implement parts of category management. At least they have the wisdom not to go, full head on into it. They don't want to turn on a switch and say we're category management next month. They want to implement parts of it. And I'm kind of lucky that I have some influence in the maturity of my organization. I can actually tell them what not to even try, or what is practical with the state of our people and data. Hopefully, this course will give you some of those hints also, what you can apply today and what you shouldn't even touch until you have your ducks in a row.
Yep, I've heard those things already. Thank you.
Okay. All right, everyone. It's 10:35 now. I'll continue. Sorry, but good discussion. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your thoughts. Okay. Our next topic is creating category and subcategory strategies. Okay. My hope from this is when I go through these slides, it's quite a lot actually. You'll realize that writing strategies requires a different kind of thinking and skills you probably are not practicing as a supply chain professional. All right. For anyone who's been through an MBA, like, oh wow, this again. But it's true that you'll have to do some of those things if you want to get a proper category strategy. Here we go. Okay, so little background. Strategy comes from the Greek word strategia, which means generalship. Comes from the combination of the word stratos, which means spread out, as in troops, different troops on the battlefield, and agos, leader. So when we throw the words out, strategy, we want to be strategic, whatever, it's all about planning. Okay, the ancient Greeks understood that wars are won not through sheer numbers, not sheer strength, not through tactics, but through strategy. All right, careful planning. You might have heard the term that tactics are for the frontline soldiers and strategies are for generals in the war room. And it's the generals that the tactics are how the war is carried out, but it's the one with the best strategy that wins the war. That's where this whole thing comes from. Okay, so how do I apply good strategy creation for our categories and subcategories? All right, so it's all about planning and looking at our categories and subcategories from different angles. All right, some of these angles you're probably not even considering yet. Okay, so number one, just like category management itself, it starts with analysis, spend analysis. All right, unless this is a brand new category, all right, you've probably been spending money at these vendors and these service providers, and if you can put them in a category, you should have data on your past history with them. All right, and then there's something called the total cost models. Okay, we'll go to that in detail in a while. And you form cross-functional teams. All right. And if you want to talk about the first resistance to change, it's going to be from here, because for category strategies to be implemented, you actually have to go beyond supply chain. People, members of a proper cross-functional teams, all right, are coming from the business. Number one, you can't write strategy if you don't have a subject matter expert on that material or service. And supply chain, with our training, with our education, you're certainly not an expert on unless you came from there. Okay, you'll need people from finance, because you can't just measure things that don't align to your external reporting. So, and sometimes you need people from HR. You know, the art of forming cross-functional teams is not something everyone is skilled at. But if you don't consider this in writing strategy, it will be very one-sided, and at worst case, it will be a strategy that will not be accepted by the business because they weren't involved. Okay, there is analyzing financial data on potential suppliers. Okay, suppliers that you've not dealt with yet. Before you even bring them into the fold, do you have the skills to assess financially? All right, and then techniques like Steeple, or some people Pestle, SWOT. What is this? Porter's 5 forces. Okay, and writing strategy on sourcing options. They're just, just go to market. No, there are actually a lot of sourcing options. Okay, so let's dive into these things that should be present even in basic subcategory strategies. Number 1, spend analysis. There are several factors to achieving effective spend analysis. Number 1, having good data, all right? So high quality, high accuracy, available data, and timely data. Okay, so let me just qualify that. When I say data is available, it means people who need it can access it. It's not on some special server that only a handful of people have connection to it. If you need to make a report, if you need to make analysis, you can connect to that data lake or that SQL server or to that Excel spreadsheet. It's available to the people who need it all the time. Timely simply means that the data is recent. Okay, there's no good writing strategy if your data is 6 months old, right? So that requires, again, horsepower and the skills to make sure that your potentially dirty data is clean and updated as often as possible. Weekly would be nice, right? Or at the very least monthly. Next, you have to have people with at least descriptive analytical skills. Okay, descriptive is just a fancy word for, excellence in reporting, reporting on data of the past. So reports, dashboards, right? And they are able to do that quickly for use across the SCM organization. My hot tip for that one is if you can find people who are skilled with predictive analytics, then now you have the power of forecasting. All right, descriptive, you need to be excellent at that, because if you can't describe what you've been spending your money on 6 months ago, a year ago, it's kind of hard to write strategy for the future. With people who can develop forecasts, you'll have a tighter strategy. Some takes into consideration upcoming events or best forecasts they see on the market. Okay, and unfortunately, these skills, they're not common in supply chain professionals. People in supply chain professionals, normally they don't have a programming background. They did not take up data science or data engineering. So again, it's one of those things about category management that makes it difficult to implement. Okay, this is from my personal experience. You not only should have reports and dashboards, but explain not just what the spend is, but also explains the how, why they happened. Okay, and you for that one, you need a very new kind of skill called data storytelling skills. All right, I say this because for over 10 years now, I've seen reports, I've seen dashboards. They're always new and fancy, and everybody wants the Power BI, everybody wants their Tableau. But in those times where I'm in front of a leader, a C-suite, I've even made dashboards for a CEO once, there's a huge disconnect. All right, we have all of these reports, we have good clean data, we've got dashboards, but our senior leaders can't seem to see value. Said, okay, I see your pretty charts, I see what we spend our money on, but can you tell me what I should focus on this month? Oftentimes, dashboards don't tell you that, because The common misconception about dashboarding is it's all about bar charts and pie charts that show you the what of things, that it's a slice and dice kind of tool. I'm one of the people that's advocating that we should stop doing that and start reporting why things happened, where they're going, and how the spend mechanisms work. Don't just show a chart, right? And again, that takes a very special kind of skill, data storytelling. I'm putting it out there just in case you're developing category management. You got analysts to help you with the data. Tell them to consider, reporting on the why more than the what. You're going to get more buy-in from leadership. Okay. I have absolutely no time to show you how to make a spend report. That's out of scope for this course. But if you have an analyst and they have basic reporting skills, you can talk about that, elsewhere. But essentially, I'm just showing you the prereqs for doing spend analysis for category management strategy, and that's clean data, good descriptive, hopefully predictive analytics, and for leader buy-in, you got to have data storytelling in there. Next, what is this thing called total cost models? All right. So in category management, you have to challenge the difference between price and cost. Okay. The tool to use here is called a should cost analysis, also called PCA, or purchase price cost analysis. And I have a how-to. Okay, how do we do a PPCA? All right, so another thing you want to print out if you get a copy of the slides. Okay, number one, there we go. You determine the direct and indirect costs that sit behind a product or service. Example, the component parts or service elements. If this means you have to break down a pump into its copper and rubber and iron and raw materials, because that's what goes into building a pump, then so be it. All right, and now you're seeing that this is not something that the average supply chain professional is prepared to do. But you know what? Again, you got the horsepower. You have economists. You've got market intel people. You'll be able to do this right. Number two, you list all the indirect costs associated with running the organization behind these products or services. You might need the help of finance for that. Number three, for both the direct and indirect costs, identify cost estimates for as many items as you can. So you consult the stakeholders, the SMEs, and other informed people in the organization. It may be necessary to look at the suppliers' reports or other research to enlarge the process. So again, this is knowledge that's not in the supply chain organization. It's with the business. Sometimes it's with the suppliers, but you're going to have to make that connection, form that relationship with them. Step 4, remember, price is not the only consideration. Value must also be mapped. So you take into account things like product size, weight, volume, degree of processing. For services, you account for hours of effort, associated consumables, and so on. For those areas that cannot be estimated, you agree on actions on how to assess these costs. And then review and interpret what the research is telling you. In layman's terms, you are actually making blueprints, all right? A recipe, a menu of the things that you buy, right? When you buy a certain specialized equipment, there might be generators or compressors, right? Or maybe chemical compounds. What are the makeup of that? What are the raw materials that go into that? And what do they cost? Where do they come from? Are they shipped across the Pacific Ocean, or are they locally sourced? Until you do that, how can you say what you should be spending on and what you should be negotiating towards when you meet with the suppliers? All right, people who don't do this, the only thing you've got to go by is what you spent with them last year, and then hope that they will give you some discount, right? But if you do this PPCA, now you have a basis, all right? And in my experience, when you involve a supplier, all right, somebody you actually are going to negotiate with in building a PPCA, they'll actually be open to the idea, because this means transparency between you, all right? And then you can fit in things like if your raw material costs go up because, I don't know, inflation, or the market's just that bad, or war or something, and suddenly now your shipping costs go up, I will allow for a price increase, and it's a calculated figure, all right? There's even a term for this mechanism called the price adjustment mechanism. In my analytics course, I actually teach how to do that. Anyway, it's an agreement between you and the vendor that if the vendor's costs are That on the but something like cracking on the microphone. Hope it's not me. Anyway, when the supplier's input costs go up, you're allowing a price increase. Conversely, if their input costs go down, they have to give you a discount. All right. Remember the whole concept of category management. It's not about who gets the biggest slice of the pie. It's increasing the size of the pie. PPCA is a clear example of how you can do that, right? They should cost or total cost models. Next, them on making your strategies. Every strategy should have a cross-functional team behind it. Okay. How do you do that? So category management is built on processes, systems, and above all, people. So you have to have certain roles. When you kick off a strategy, there has to be an executive sponsor. So this is a champion who actively promotes the initiative throughout the organization. Recognized at the board level. Yeah, because anything less will make it hard for the project leader to rally attention and resources. Must carry sufficient power within the organization to sway others that need recruiting project. So executive sponsors cannot be a frontline manager or a mid manager. It has to be somebody with either general manager or vice president in his title. Otherwise, there's not enough influence and the purchasing power to draw attention and resources to your cause. It's a project leader for your strategies. A project leader has operational command of how the project works and within the framework and that the sponsor builds. He's the one that will guide the people implementing the strategy. He's more in touch with the why of the strategy, why we need to have it, and how to make it work. He reports back up to the sponsor every quick win and progress and budget information. Regular action-oriented meetings between the project leader and executive sponsor are crucial. And the project leader needs to have some managerial status and power, as well as a deep understanding of how the organization works. Okay, so first person, executive sponsor, you need a project leader. You also need team members. And this consists of representatives from both SCM and its stakeholders in the business. Barrier. When I see this is a barrier to me, because can you really convince people in the business or finance or these other departments to now carve out time in a month to meet with you and work on something that has nothing to do with their goals and bonuses? It's difficult. But remember that data storytelling skill I said earlier. If you can convince people in business that this strategy will create value for the company as a whole, and it's not just for you in supply chain, you might be able to convince their leaders who will say, yeah, now it's part of your responsibilities or your individual targets for the year. A core team to 5 to 7 is typical. Of course, my experience is medium to large companies. So you have a smaller company, maybe you can't build a cross-functional team that big for all your strategies. So adjust as necessary. A team role demands a reasonable level of time commitment, but not necessarily full-time. You know, for certain categories that aren't critical to operations, all right, maybe meeting once a month is fine. But for others, let's say, for example, in logistics, if your company highly dependent on trucks and rail cars, and the supply of that and the timely supply of that is of utmost importance, maybe you meet weekly, right? Again, it depends on the complexity of the category. A cross-functional team should have a team charter. A team charter bonds the teams in terms of activities and the goals for the project. It's usually developed at the earliest feasible stage to set the outputs of the project so that all parties agree on what is to be achieved. Notice that I use the word project very often. One of the hallmarks of world-class category management is treating sourcing activities as projects. Team charter serves 4 main processes. Number 1, to gain alignment or understanding of the project and the roles of the team members, to serve as a basis for discussions with the sponsor about what is expected of them, to provide a definite definitive document that summarizes its project, the project, its aims, people, and targets, and to gain commitment from of the team to the project, the sourcing project, this category strategy. So there, in a nutshell, this is what a cross-functional team looks like for a category strategy. Depending on the size of your company, you might not be able to create one for all your categories, but you should at least have it for your most critical categories. Okay. We can analyze internal data relatively easy, but how do we do financial analysis on potential suppliers, those that don't have a contract with us yet? Systematic analysis of existing and potential suppliers is a recognized part of supplier management and central to setting a sourcing strategy and category management approach. So the purpose of doing this is asking ourselves before we go to market, are they the right supplier? Do they create the right associations for third parties, such as customers, other suppliers, regulating bodies? Like, will there be a cost to doing business with them because they are associated with entities or business partners that might have a reputational effect on us? Okay, there are many sources of relevant information to answer the two questions above, but we should specifically focus on financial viability and business performance. And here are some of the financial ratios you might want to look. Oh, sorry, it's the next page. Yeah, okay. Oh, it's a how-to, sorry. Okay, it's number one, the supplier's financial statements, if you can. All right, so a fully audited financial statement at the end of the last financial year, that's publicly available for public companies. For private companies, most of them says, no, we're private companies, will not provide you that. But, you know, if you're experienced with supplier relationship and negotiation, you can always make that a prerequisite to doing business with your company, that you have to be transparent. Show us your financials if you want to participate in a bidding, for example. There are ways. Okay. And here are the ratios I promised. So calculate significant business ratios, and most importantly, compare them against best in the industry and location. So here are some: solvency, efficiency, profitability. Right, and I'm just flashing on screen how to actually calculate that. If you know how to read balance sheets from financial statements, I won't dwell on it, and because you're all going to get a copy of this anyway. But are you currently doing these when you evaluate the supplier? Kudos to you if you actually do. Okay, and then your company might have a credit check department. If not, do your best to try to do that. Okay, the steeple analysis. Some people call it pestle analysis. All right, it's a managerial tool to analyzing all the external forces that affect your category or your company. All right, without looking at external forces, you're shooting in the dark when you're trying to make recommendations on sourcing approach. Okay, so this is familiar to everyone who's taken up management courses or MBAs. It's a hallmark of those things. So STEEPLE is an acronym. All right, social, cultural, technological, economic, environmental, political, legal, and very recently ethical. It used to be called PESTLE because it didn't have the ethical, but they just added that one very recently. So essentially, you take your category, the thing that you're buying, okay, and then you ask yourselves, what are the social, cultural forces that affect my supply of this? So if it's something that only comes from Asia, or it is most effectively cost effectively coming from Asia, all right. So there could be cultural things that might prove difficult, like maybe the manual is only in Chinese, or it's well, I don't know, but social cultural effects in Asia that's not common in North America might affect how you procure that, or if the product suddenly is not available anymore because of what's going on there. Technological is when you have new technology that makes certain things obsolete. Is the thing that you're managing going to be approaching obsolescence in a few months, and you need to look for alternatives now? All right, and maybe your strategy shouldn't be to negotiate, but to search for new kinds of suppliers. You wouldn't know that if the only thing you're thinking about is commercial rates, right? Economic, so market prices. If you look at your total cost, your PPCA, and you're tracking the commodity prices of the raw materials, you'll be better prepared in the near future, even the far future, to adapt to, let's say, a crashing market or certain raw materials that will become scarce, right? Environmental. If this thing that you are procuring or this service has emissions effect, right? Is it something that you should spend money? Should you spend money on vendors that are more environmentally conscious, even if that means increasing rates, that sort of thing. And then I don't want to go through all this, but political, legal, and ethical. This exercise just ensures that whoever's writing the strategies isn't just looking at the company, not with blinders on and looking at your spend. This means that you are also looking at external market forces that affect your vendors and your raw materials and your supply, essentially. That's STIBO. Okay. A bit more popular, but oftentimes not done right, is the SWOT analysis. All right. SWOT analysis serves as a valuable framework in strategic planning for evaluating a business's competitive position within the marketplace. All right. The thing that a lot of people get wrong is that the S and the W, the strengths and weaknesses, that refers to internal forces. What does your company do great, right? That will make sure that you will secure the supply, or what are the weaknesses internally that might result in price increases or the loss of a supplier, right? You look at yourselves internally when you're thinking of strengths and weaknesses, whereas the O and the T in the acronym, opportunities and threats, those are external to the organization. Opportunities is something that you haven't taken advantage of, but may want to. All right. So if there's a new trend that's happening, like, for example, everyone's into AI right now, and you're still doing the old-fashioned way of analyzing your data with Excel formulas and paying maybe a vendor to do that for you. Maybe you should think of a vendor who can do automated solutions with artificial intelligence or something like that. All right. Threats are forces in the external that you do not change, it will affect you. It hasn't affected you yet, but they're out there, right? It could be the suppliers are consolidating maybe, or they're going to be bought out, right? It hasn't happened yet, but if it does, it will increase the prices. Or are economic factors affecting the ability of my suppliers to maintain their shipping costs for me, right? Strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats. Again, it forces the person doing the strategy to think of these internal and external forces before he recommends how he approaches the sourcing. Okay, similar to that is something known as Porter's 5 Forces, a very popular management tool. So the Porter's 5 Forces framework is a well-known tool that supports the assessment of the attractiveness of the industry in terms of competitive forces. All right. So if STIBO was macroeconomic, things that are happening in the world that you really have no control over, Porter's 5 Forces is microeconomic, is specific to your industry, specific to your group of suppliers. You have some level of influence on this. All right. So threats of new entrants, meaning you have a bunch of suppliers that provide something, materials, services. Can a new kind of supplier join in the fray, right? And affect them in a good or bad way, all right? On the other end of the opposite side of that, at the bottom, you have threats from substitutes. Okay, maybe you're procuring this item, all right, and they are OEM. They're the only ones who make this thing. Well, now suddenly, because of new technology, there's a substitute for it. Okay, will that create an adversarial relationship now with your supplier? Because now you can actually go find someone else, or how does that play, positively or negatively with you? On the left and right, you have suppliers' bargaining power and buyers' bargaining power. When I use the word buyer, I'm talking about your organization. And of course, suppliers' bargaining power is their power. So usually when the bargaining power is high, the supplier power is low. And when the supplier power is high, the buyer's power is low. Right? Like, for example, you are the big fish. You're the company that spends a lot of money with them. You have the power to negotiate and command rates. And then the supplier, because you are most of the revenue, they will give you whatever they want. Or it's the opposite. Maybe you're the small fish, they're the big fish. And the fifth force is competitive rivalry within the industry. All right. Sometimes it's a good thing if you have many suppliers, all right, within your portfolio, because they're competing with each other. They will be, and they know that, so they'll be more likely to give you favorable commercial terms. Or do they know that they're unique? They're a monopoly, and there's no rivalry within that category, and you have very little influence over over how that contract will be shaped. That's Porter's 5 forces. Okay, and once you consider all those forces, the next natural part of a strategy is what then do we do if we need to source? How are we going to approach the market? Okay, and there are many ways you can do that. The strategy should make a recommendation. Okay, so do we use competition? All right, for this critical category, but low, not critical, for a low risk category, but high spend but low risk, right? Maybe you'd like to use the traditional methods like RFX, EOY. You put this to bid because there are lots of suppliers. Maybe the risk is so low you can actually swap them out when you want, right? Or maybe you do not put it out to bid and you resort to the power of negotiation. So you only have a few suppliers, maybe even one supplier that you'd just like to negotiate as much as you can until you cannot anymore, right? Then that could be the recommendation for sourcing option. Okay, and then from there you get the definitions of single source and sole source. For those of you that don't know, single source is a supplier chosen without engaging in a competitive procurement process, even if there are other bidders out there that can provide it. You choose to go with the incumbent or your favorite. Whereas sole source, even if you wanted to have a bidding activity, there's only one provider of that product or service. So you can't do bidding. All right. In more recent times, another possible avenue for sourcing is the use of e-auctions and reverse auctions. Okay, I put that picture of ice cream because it's kind of like the flavor, so many flavors of how to do this. You can do standard reverse auction, cherry-picked auction, Dutch auction, cherry Dutch auction, the Japanese auction, bundled auction. All right, won't get into much detail of it. We'll talk more about this when we talk about strategic sourcing. But yeah, there are for low spend, low risk categories where a detailed scope of work is not really a requirement. You might want to use online ways of doing it so that you can also source it very quickly. Okay, continuing that, you have reverse auctions, okay, which is literally the reverse of a conventional auctions where the price goes down, not go up. And you might want to choose the use of joint proposition improvement. So that's where the buyer and the supplier work together under their contract to jointly improve performance or to develop the contract to their mutual gain. A good example of this is you might want to partner with maybe a local indigenous company that's starting out, right? And for reputational gain, you might want to invest in that company so that they can get better at delivering their product or service. So the strategy here, the sourcing strategy, is not adversarial, not competitive bidding, or not even electronic, where maybe an indigenous company won't have much experience with that, but it's one of more of mutual growth. I need you as much as you need me, and we'll grow together. Okay, and then at the end, every strategy must have a recommendation. Okay, so I'm oversimplifying it over here, but essentially, after you've done all those analysis of the forces, you do your SWOT, you do your steeple, right? You understand what's out in the market. You have a list of potential suppliers, and you financially, at least you have an idea of how their financial performance might be, right? And you have realistic sourcing avenues, these sourcing options. your strategy should end with something like, for this category, we go to market. Right? If the contract is over, we go to market. We do 3 bids in a buy, or we do single sole source, or we do nothing and maintain status quo for the next number of years because we have confidence that our supplier is with us for the long haul, and we do not want to harm the relationship by going out to market every year. So we stick with them for this number of years. Okay, or your sourcing strategy, your category strategy might be to actually do this stuff in-house. Stop hiring the consultants. Now let's do it our way, because our spend analysis shows us that the value we're getting out of maybe these consultants isn't as much as the money the money we're spending with them, and it's actually skills we might be able to develop in-house. So that might be your category strategies, to actually not do supply chain management, but to do it in-house. Result of a category strategy might be vertical integration. Partner with the suppliers of our suppliers, or backwards or forward integration. We now own the process closer to our customers, right? Rather than having a middleman, managing that for us. Okay. Lease instead of buying, right? Might be a result of the strategy, or the search for substitutes, especially when you have items that are so high risk that the loss of its supply will mean shutting down our operations. Then in that case, the category strategy is not to negotiate, not to bid, but to look for replacements. All right. One more topic to go, but any question on category and subcategory strategy? I have one. Is there a certain format, a recognized format for this? Absolutely not. You can do this any way you want. It could be, you can create a Word document template. The spirit of doing category and subcategory strategy is simply that it enforces the rigor, looking at all the forces that affect the category that you're managing. Because if you're going to spend a lot of money with it, you have to consider, one, your internal spend with it, who's out there, can they do business with us, should we go down to certain commercial sourcing routes, or will they be harmful? The proof that you've done that, okay, is often enough. It is oftentimes enough to say, yep, it's well out, it's well thought of. Even if we're just starting category management, it's already leaps and bounds over just reactively renewing a contract just because it's close to expiry, which is what most transactional SCM departments do. They just have a list of their contracts. So, okay, it's going to expire in 3 months. Okay, let's just renew it, or we put a bid, and that be the end of that. Category and subcategory strategies, a lot of work compared to how it used to be done. Any questions before I move to the next topic, the last topic for this morning? Is anyone here actually doing this stuff? You have a process to write category strategies, like this. Anyone?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
That's good, Steve. You're a more aggressive. You're in a more progressive supply chain department if you're actually doing these. And I know you wanted to talk about where this resistance to change comes in. Well, in my experience, just implementing this process of writing category strategies be met by resistance, especially in that cross-functional part. You're actually asking for commitment, time commitment from people outside of SCM. And it's kind of obvious.
Yeah.
And it's kind of obvious also that if you don't have the right data, none of this will, it's a non-starter.
Yeah, it becomes subjective and opinion-based rather than factual and evidence-based.
Yeah.
Hey, Ian, it's Alan here, and great to hear Steve's voice. It's been a while since him and I connected. So hello, Steve, and it's interesting because you see it as well, Ian, in the work that you do and in training so many people in the space. It's I think that the biggest complaint that we have from folks is that they're so busy with all of the transactional things that it's really difficult to find the time and space to do a lot of the work that you're describing here, right?
Yeah, Alan, and you and I know that real category management is a full-time job.
Absolutely, it's in cases where we find people doing it at the side of their desk, it's so hard to do because there's so much in it to really understand a category fully.
Yeah. Also, conceptually, the goals of transactional SCM is very, very different from category management. In transactional SCM, you just need to, process as many orders as you can in a day. It's all about speed and accuracy, that we get the orders to the right vendors. But with category management, it's about the long game. It's about making good, thought out plans and preparing negotiation, battle tactics to make sure that you get good, good vendors, good rates, not just for a few months, but for 5, 10, 3, 5, 10 years looking forward. It requires a lot of analysis and brain power.
Yeah. The other point to bring up too is that one of the biggest complaints, or maybe not complaints, but issues that we're hearing from business units around supply chain folks is, well, you guys don't understand our business. You guys don't understand the product, right? And so taking the effort to go through the things that Ian has walked through here really gives you that credibility around the expertise around that commodity, that category, right? That is so key to gain that trust of the business unit that you're working with.
Mm-hmm. Involve your business unit, your SMEs, in the very earliest stages of strategy development. Not so if it's sourcing, it's too late already, but they should be part of the strategy. Okay, let's move on to our last topic of the morning, segmentation and tiering. Right, I consider one of the core process of real category management. Without this, you cannot say that you're doing category management. Okay, what is it? What is it? Another slide deck. Let me bring that up. Yeah, it's so important, actually built on another slide deck. Okay, here we go. Okay, let me just sharing the right thing. Okay, here it is. To be more strategic, the procurement function had to evolve. And this person, Peter Kraljic, in 1983, he's a management consultant, one of the founders of CIPS, the Chartered Institute of Procurement of Supply. I learned all of my supply chain stuff. He found that through his study and work with hundreds of organizations, that work in a traditional procurement, traditional SCM, okay, the transactional SCM organization was very routine, transactional, and internally focused, and had absolutely no consideration for supply disruptions coming from external forces. They were looking at the steeple stuff, okay, or the Porter's 5 forces: the threat constitutes, rivalry with industry, and the threat of new entrants. Procurement very much transaction-based, commercial, and commercial rates-based, and they weren't getting that much value, right? They weren't planful at all. They just focused on what they can see within their little bubble of an organization. And so he invented a tool that essentially was the basis for the evolving of processes that we now know as category management. He called it, of course, the Kraljic matrix. He uses his own name. So there are two axes. On the vertical axis of supplier power, okay, low supplier to high high supplier power. At the bottom, on the horizontal, you have low buyer power, and then buyer power. And then you cut that box into 4 quadrants: strategic, leverage, non-critical, and bottleneck. Let's talk more about what do you mean by buyer power and supplier power, okay? Okay, hold on. I got important notes on it I really don't want to miss out, so I'm just going to bring it up. Okay. So buyers and suppliers, of course, they enter a commercial relationship, right? Where the supplier provides goods and services, and in return, the buyer pays them for that. Okay, that's the foundations of a commercial relationship. Power is defined as the ability to direct or influence the behavior of others. That's what power means. But in a buyer-supplier relationship, you can think of power as what is given and what can be taken away. So apply that. What gets given and what can be taken away in the spaces of a buyer and supplier? Well, for buyer, it's very easy. They give money and they can take that away anytime they want. Okay, so how will that a supplier? Okay, well, if the buyer just spends his money elsewhere, all right, that could lead to the demise of a supplier, or it will it can significantly hurt their bottom line. All right, so another word for buyer power is simply how much money they spend with suppliers. That's what buyer power is. With suppliers, it's not so easy. Okay, so suppliers, the thing that they give, that they provide, is of course the materials and the services. But when they take it away, when they take their business elsewhere, or make their commercial rates so high that you can't afford it anymore, it affects you in many, many ways, not just your bottom line, but it could mean the stoppage of operations. It could mean people getting hurt, right? It could mean, of course, your costs going up. It could have reputational damages, right? Or, environmental and social impacts. A lot of harm suppliers can do if they do not supply the things you get from them, right? And there's a word for that, all right? When suppliers take away what you buy from them, it's called risk. All these things, the stuff operations, the reputation, the environmental, the people getting hurt, that is risk to your business. And so when we substitute now those words, spend and risk, on the Kraljic matrix, we have this now, okay? Where if you can measure two things with all your suppliers, the level of spend you have with it and the level of risk they pose to your organization, you can now plot all of your suppliers and categories on this thing called the Kraljic matrix. In 1983, those were the terms he used: bottleneck, strategic, leverage, non-critical. Right now, more recently, they have more updated terms that doesn't sound so bad. So bottleneck, now we call it surety of supply. Strategic is still strategic, and the leverage vendors, it's tactical sounds so much more friendly now, so they're called tactical. And then what used to be non-critical, now we call them transactional. All right. Now here's where category management departs so much from transactional SCM. When a vendor is in that box in the upper left, surety of supply, all right, just looking at the axes, these are suppliers where your spend is low. It's not material, right? But the risk is very high, all right? Maybe because they're a commodity that only they can supply, and if they stop supplying, the lights go out, right? We stop producing, or we stop shipping. The category strategy for vendors or an entire subcategory that falls in surety of supply is to secure long and short-term supply and seek alternative suppliers. There's nothing in there about negotiate with these guys or form commercial alliances. In fact, commercial rates has nothing to do with surety of supply, because by the very nature of them being so high risk and you spending so little money with them, is you're a small fish, they're the big fish. You have absolutely none or very little power at the negotiation table. So don't even try, right? Or that should not be your focus. You do not put your best supply chain negotiators on these suppliers. You deploy your best analysts, your best economists, your market intel people, because the goal of treating suppliers that are in that surety of supply is to actually reduce the risk. How do you do that, right? It's by searching for alternatives or finding technologies that we can use so that we're not too reliant on these people. So that's one. if a supplier or subcategory falls in the lower left box, transactional, so low spend, low risk. I'm talking about janitorial services, office supplies, toilet paper, right? They certainly they won't harm business if we stop getting them, right? So these are products and services that are suited to systems to contracting and e-procurement systems that can be automated. Okay, so in your Pareto principle, these are the 80% of your vendors, and collectively they only give you 20% of the value, or even less. The strategy, the category strategy for anything that's transactional, is to seek efficient processing, standardization, order volume, and inventory optimization. All right. I like to think that the best way to manage these suppliers is to actually automate the relationship. Give them contracts where we can just buy from them as if they were, a shopping cart at Amazon. We need this. We just check it off and they will supply. All right. These are suppliers whose spend is so small and the risk they pose is also so small. It's actually inefficient to have scorecards with monthly scorecards with these guys. These are more like, all right, we give you a contract. All right, we expect you to supply. After that, we'll see you in a year. All right, whether we renew or not. So it's a very hands-off, arm's length kind of relationship because it simply isn't worth your time. Category management is as expensive as it is. To dedicate so many people to transactional suppliers is truly a waste of money. Okay, then you have tactical suppliers. Okay, this one is the spend is very high. You're throwing a lot of money at them, but the risk is low. Okay, and why is that? Okay, so this is the area where the buyer has all the power. So buyer dominated competitive bidding. Risk is low because of many alternative suppliers out there, possible substitutions. So for people who are coming from a transactional, SCM organization like some of you here, this is going to be fun because the strategy here is to deploy the full power of negotiation and all those things that you learned as a supply chain student when you got your degree. So you exploit full purchasing power through sourcing, target pricing, product substitution, all the tricks in the book for commercial rates, risk and reward contract structures, price adjustment mechanisms. This is where it's actually going to work. Because you're the big fish, they're the small fish. You hold all the cards, they will likely say yes. Okay, so your negotiators, that's where they should be deployed into tactical suppliers, right? Not the surety of supply. An example of tactical supplier. Here's a one that you probably know. Consultants. Consultants are expensive. So you spend a lot of money on them. But they're not unique. There are many consultants out there. If consultants suddenly stop talking to you, does that mean your operation stopped? Not really. Actually, no, they don't. Right? You've existed without consultants before. Why are you can't be reliant on them fully right now? So you can negotiate with consultants. You should be able to negotiate because again, they're easily replaceable. Or let's say things that you buy from a hardware store, right? It's so many substitutes. Even if it's expensive, you can get it from another hardware store, or you can try another brand of this because it's not high risk. It's almost commoditized. And finally, in the upper right, you have the strategic box, high spend, high risk. All right, I like to call this as the box where you need them as much as they need you. All right, so the theme here is growing a business together. So the category strategy for anything that falls in strategic is to find that balance of power in purchaser-supplier relationship. And it should be more performance-based rather than commercial and rates-based. All right, tread lightly when you're working with a strategic supplier. Okay. You cannot hammer them too much and treat them like a tackle, because if they are unhappy with you and they suddenly decide that we will just take our business elsewhere, it will hurt your business so much because the operational risk is very high, right? Now, from experience, there is, I would say, a certain exception to that rule. There are certain suppliers where it's a good idea to consider them strategic, even if they're low spend, right? And that would be in Canada, indigenous suppliers. The reason for that is yeah, the spend might be low, but in Alberta at least, the reputational risk of not working with local Indigenous suppliers could be so bad, reputation-wise, that it might harm your companies in other immeasurable ways. All right, and it's always good business when you try to grow local businesses. So the theme of mutual growth truly applies with working with an Indigenous supplier. Okay, so that's one of the few exceptions that I know have actually worked when you treat them as strategic and not a transactional supplier. Okay. So when you do segmentation, okay, and this is half of the lesson. There's another part called set tiering. But when you do segmentation, what you're really doing is you're planning how the relationship will be managed. So it's all about SRM. Okay, and it's also transferable to category and subcategory strategy and even negotiation planning. All right. Practically speaking, if you're dealing with an OEM and you have very little power in negotiation, you won't push too hard. You might ask probing questions, but you'll be not making any demands out of somebody who is the only supplier of something, right? Or conversely, with somebody who's tactical, you will use all the tricks in the book, and you might have a high rate of success. Okay. Now let's look at the other thing, the other side of the equation, tiering. So this is not segmentation, tiering. It's still the same Kraljic matrix box, 4 bucks, but this not 4 bucks. You have risk and spend, but this time instead of dividing it into 4, you divide it into 3. This. Okay, the areas are called tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. All right, the use of tiering is very different from segmentation. Tiering is used for work allocation. Recognizing the fact that category management, you will have limited resources, limited manpower in your category management, and you're probably managing hundreds, maybe even thousands of vendors. Where do we focus our efforts on? Where do we put our FTEs on? Okay, this illustration is just a picture of a calculator I actually created because this was a problem in a past company of mine. Thousands of suppliers and only a handful of people to manage them. And to prevent burnout, can identify our tier 1 and manage them very closely and try to reduce the level of management through automation and substitutes with our tier 3 suppliers. That's what tiering is for. Okay, so tiering is not for category strategy. It's not for negotiation planning. It's for workforce or workload prioritization. And it is equally as important because if your people are not focused on the right things, category management falls apart. So together, all right, this is what a segmentation and tiering chart might look like. Okay. You plot all your suppliers, or well, not all your suppliers, but all your suppliers in a category, right? I'll tell you why this is important. You might find a few strategic suppliers. There will be more under the surety of supply and tactical supply, tactical boxes, all right? More of them, not as much as strategic, it can't be, but there'll be more there. And then because of the Pareto principle, you should see most of your suppliers in the transactional box. All right. If you do this exercise and you're seeing the opposite, that most of your suppliers are strategic or surety of supply, one can only conclude one of two things, right? One, you didn't understand the exercise and you're not doing this right. Or two, your company is is hanging by a thread, right? You've got too many high-risk suppliers. You've allowed your company to be reliant on suppliers that can leave you anytime and can seriously damage your operations because you've maybe rationalized too much, and now they're all high risk. That's very telling. Okay, but in peacetime, in a regular situation, in most companies, you should see 80% of your suppliers in transactional. Okay. And when we put tier lines over this, it's the same chart, but now divide by 3. You should have only a few tier 1, more tier 2, and a lot of tier 3. All right. It should also, because again, limited workforce, you certainly do not have time to do monthly check-ins with 3,000 suppliers, the ones that are in tier 3 or something. Okay. Let's talk about pros and cons and even pitfalls of doing segmentation. And this is where my experience will come in that shows you how this can actually fail. All right, so advantages of doing this is segmentation will help determine what kind of relationship to develop for different kind of suppliers. All right, that information will help you develop and implement better strategies and have more favorable outcome at negotiations. Someone once told me that doing segmentation, especially when it's about planning your supply relationship, is a lot like parenting, right? What is the worst thing that a parent can do to their kid if they have many kids? What's the worst thing that a parent can do? Someone once told me that the worst thing.
Sorry, I was going to say same parenting approach.
Same parenting.
Ignore
treating them all equally.
Ignore them.
Yeah, thinking that all your kids are the same is the answer. So yeah, if you treat all your kids the same way, right? That's one of the worst thing a parent do. It perfectly transfers over to this exercise. You cannot treat all your suppliers in the same way, even though that sounds nice. It's standardization. We should have the same tone. We should do it with a wide brush and talk to them the same way, same strategy to everything, because it's standardization and standardization is good. That's a terrible idea, because you might think that all your suppliers are just suppliers and we treat them the same way, but I can guarantee that they do not look at you the same way. Some of these suppliers, you are their everything. They are a business because of the spend with them, and with others, they truly don't need you. You are an instance, right? You are one of many companies they can take their money to, and you're the small fish in that area. So you can see dangerous it is to try to adopt a strategy where everyone's the same, everyone's equal. Okay, think like a parent. Your kids learn different ways, have different interests, right? They have different attitudes. So you adapt your parenting to each kid. This is actually teaching you to do the same thing. Segmentation can also ensure internal alignment. For example, supplier roles, responsibilities, and actions. All right, with the cross-functional team, having segmentation ready, right, before you make your charter, will be clear of what you're all trying to achieve here, right? There's nobody here that's misaligned on the sourcing strategy or how you negotiate or how you approach relationship, because you all now know amongst yourselves that it's a surety of supplier kind of surety of supply kind of supplier. We have to be careful. Right? We have to try to look for substitutes and do not be too aggressive when talking to these guys, because if we're hooped, that sort of thing. Okay. On the side of tiering can ensure optimal allocation of limited management time and resources. We know that. We've heard from you also or a while ago that so difficult when you're doing both tactical day-to-day and strategy. Yeah, so that's what tiering can actually help you with that. Right. Pitfalls. Everything you're going to see here are things I wrote because I saw them happening multiple times. These are real pitfalls that happen. Number one, companies can use this process as a ranking exercise. Suppliers or subcategories are forced into quadrants for a reason like optics. So that, hey, daddy, my supplier is more important than yours. I have the most strategic suppliers. Oh my, I've seen that happen far too often. Rather than the true purpose of this exercise, which is segmentation and tiering, supplier relationship management, and workload prioritization. It's not about optics. It's not about forcing your suppliers that you have bragging rights and say, look at my category, I have the most strategic suppliers, or the highest risk suppliers are all in surety of supply. That's not what this is for. You should be very effective when you're ranking risk and spend. Another pitfall, a very real pitfall, is thinking that this is just a paper exercise, right? This is another one of those management tools, right, that we can do without. Remember, segmentation and tiering has real life impacts on business operations and the suppliers themselves. Doing this incorrectly will have serious repercussions. Here are some examples. Tier 1 suppliers may have more rigorous KPI score sheets and monthly meetings. Imagine applying that to too many suppliers, or worse, the wrong suppliers. Example number 2. High risk but low OEM, original equipment manufacturer suppliers, are usually in the supply of supply quadrant, and therefore would be the stronger party at any negotiation. Imagine negotiating with the supplier as if they were tactical or transactional. Disaster could happen. Okay, here's another pitfall, real one, being too rigid with the standards, all right? So these risk groups, associated weighting, setting the midpoint, if you overthink this, all right, it doesn't work for category management as a whole because each category is different, all right? Material suppliers should not be held to the same risk standards as service suppliers. For example, you know, maybe in services, safety risk rating is important because they are exposed to heavy machinery, and we should really be careful with the suppliers who are entering our plant and make sure they have good safety record. Would that really be important to maybe a supplier of office supplies? Are they really, does safety need to be weighted higher? You should, you rank them on risk based on the nature of what they supply, and you cannot be too rigid in how you do this. It should fit the subcategory, right? Flexible, use an appropriate risk scoring mechanism for each subcategory. Approach tiering with a view on the size of the team that is accountable for supplier management. So always have that view that you're doing the tier, at least the tiering part, how big your team is, okay? So if you're trying to influence it and have more tier 1 than you actually do, but you only have maybe a size of 10, 10 people in category management, it's not going to work, right? It has to be realistic to what the size of your team and the skills of your team also can achieve. Another pitfall is trying to apply this to all suppliers, okay? Well, for 2 reasons. One, your suppliers in different categories and materials have different risk. So you really cannot lump together your service providers with your material providers. And even the material providers, you cannot just put them all together because they're materials, because maybe chemical supply is very different from IT software, right? The risk for each is the different risk areas. So you cannot do segmentation of all of them just to save time. So also, yeah, doing it on 1,000 suppliers, nobody likes that. But I've had lots of success with doing this on your top suppliers, and then you expand from there. Because this is a real phenomenon, suppliers with high spend tend to also high risk. Not always, of course, there are exceptions, right? But that's usually the case. So if out of 1,000 suppliers, you look at your top 100, and your top 100 will have most of the spend anyway. The thing that you're trying to manage, you're covering 80 to 90%, whatever. You do segmentation on that, and then just, if you're running out of time, just say everyone else, the low spend suppliers, we will treat them as transactional. You can do that, and you'll have a working strategy, right? Without being bogged down with the numbers and the sheer amount of suppliers you're going to try to do it on your top one first. And if you have time later on, then you can expand the scope. You do more vendors. And finally, pitfall is rushing the process, okay, or segmenting tiering solely based on spend, right? I've experienced in my past where category management leaders, they regress by saying, let's just forget the other axis, let's by spend, okay? If they're high spend, they're tactical and surety of supply. If they're low spend, they're transactional. And that's a dangerous approach, because again, sometimes you can have low spend suppliers, sometimes very low spend, like not even $10,000 a year, but they are providing a piece of equipment, a piece of, or maybe a certain compound that is so critical operation that you cannot afford to lose it. Then if you were only looking at spend, you'd completely miss that, and you might lose them as a supplier. Any pitfalls anybody would like to add to this? Have you experienced this before? I mean, at least for those that's tried this. Many of you have not done segmentation and tiering, but for those of you that try to implement this, can you relate?
Definitely, yeah. It can be quite controversial when you're trying to segment. Controversial when you're trying to.
Yeah. I will not name the company, but I've been in one where the leader said we should do one segmentation for all our suppliers, right? Because because standardization is good, right? And hiding behind the concept that we're doing segmentation, we're not saying that everyone's equal. Not considering the fact that different categories are managed different ways, and you cannot put certain high risk service suppliers in the same bucket as material suppliers. So what happened in that organization I used to be in, where we did it on all our suppliers? What happened is most of our material suppliers ended up in transactional because of low spend. Most of them were transactional, and then the only ones that ended up strategic were some construction and engineering suppliers. And all that time we spent doing this came up with terrible recommendations, because now we were sending the message to our leaders that, hey, look, our materials are not important. They're all transactional. See, when it should have been, you take materials separately. Materials will own strategic suppliers and surety of supply. You treat them separately from services. Services will have their own also. That should have been what happened. Oh, Alan. Sorry? Alan, you got raised?
Yes. Ian, can you maybe talk to the process of segmentation when it like who gets involved in segmentation, and what's your experience in getting the right involved and sort of the structure of those groups involved? If you can speak to that, that'll be great.
I'll do you one better. I'll demo it right after this next few slides, because that's the second tool I'm giving you all. I'm going to give you all a segmentation and tiering tool. You can do it, with your companies after this course. So I end my slides here with something called strategy to tactics, because I've been talking like 30,000 feet all this time, that category strategy at high level. But eventually, somebody's going to want to translate these strategy into what do we do then? What exact tactics do we do with these suppliers after we've done the CrowdLogic matrix? There's this really neat book. I call it consulting gold, called The Purchasing Chessboard. It's really old, okay? And a lot of consultants. My copy, I actually stole this from a GM. He lent it to me and never returned, because I love this book so much. Anyway, so it's called The Purchasing Chessboard, and what it does is, yes, it tells you that I'm going to super summarize for you. You do your segmentation, and then all your vendors or subcategories will fall into the quadrants, right? And then you know the strategies for each. Okay, so the 4 strategies: change the nature of demand for surety of supply, seek joint advantage, stuff I said a while ago. And then as they're plotted, okay, these 4 strategies now become levers, things you can use in your dealings with them, or levers you can pull at negotiations, right? So look at the strategic suppliers. You're thinking about value partnership, integrated operations planning, all right? Whereas in your surety of supply, we're looking at risk management, innovation breakthrough. Over here, your tactical, the traditional stuff, target pricing, global tendering, and then for your transactional, wherever they fall in these 4 boxes, you can think of sourcing, volume bundling, that sort of thing. And then these leverage, if you take it even further, then they become tactics. These are the rubber hits the road. This is what exactly we're going to apply when we deal with these suppliers. It's called the chessboard because it's 8x8, 64. So, all right, if you this way, all right, there's several layers to it. You do your segmentation and you plot your vendors, okay? And if you do it right, you should have a very few in strategic, some supply, some tactical, and most in transactional. Okay, then you peel the onion layers, all right? These are you just verify, are these the right strategies? Okay, it makes sense. Next, here are the levers we can use when we deal with them. And finally, Here are the tactics. See how cool that was? Now we actually have something concrete to do with our vendors. And I'm not saying this is the only thing you can do. This just gives you an idea of what tactics are appropriate for that supply. Like, for example, if some vendor falls in this expressive bidding tactic, but you feel that maybe total cost of ownership is a better tactic, that's totally fine. It's not a hard and set rule. It's more of a guideline. But prior to this, to A.T. Kearney developing this purchasing chessboard, people were actually unclear on, how category management can be made real. So that's why I love this book. This is the bridge between concepts and strategy, the actual tactics. Okay, and with my remaining time, I will demo a tool that I will give a copy of all of you. I developed this for this course. Okay, so it's an Excel tool. So I know it doesn't work on your computers, right? So let me just click this button over here. What you do is, if you're short in time, just put your suppliers here. Okay, I've made it super simple. I put 20. This one can accommodate like 250. And believe me, you don't want to try this on 1,000 suppliers, because even if the spreadsheet could do it, you don't have the time to do risk rating on 1,000 suppliers. So start with, put your spend, put your category name. It's just a spreadsheet, okay? And then you click this button where we show or hide the risk scores. All right. Remember, risk is not one thing. It is actually many things. Past and potential supply disruption. Have they failed you in the past? Supplier financial stability and solvency. That those financial ratios I was talking about, are these guys that are likely going to fold, or are they financially strong and survive a 10-year agreement or something? Criticality to operations. Will the lights go out if providing? Do they have unique technology or capabilities, or are they local that if we try to look for someone else, it'll cost us even more stuff? Are they transparent with their books and allow us the ability to control costs, or are they so secretive? Switching costs, yeah, they might be low. They might be low spend, and maybe there are others like them. But to switch them out might be extremely expensive, right? And finally, do they have impacts on regulatory, environmental, and safety? If they underperform on this, someone could get hurt, right? And then it's a spreadsheet. You just put rankings to these, right? In this case, I put 10% only on supplier transparency, because I don't think it's up to you. Maybe you can make it all on critical to operations. Put 100% here. You just divide weights among this, and then with your cross-functional team, you do not do this as an isolated supply chain team. You just give a risk rating, and I made it simple, 1 to 3. All right. So you look at supplier 1. You're in a room, a meeting room with your cross-functional team. You have representative from the business, right? An operations guy. You have representation from finance to answer the solvency question, right? And HR or safety for the safety things. You have qualified people to discuss this and just put a score, okay? And how I've executed this in the past successfully, don't overthink it. There are lots of risks there anyway. If you feel that they're high risk, go ahead and give them a 3. If they're low risk, just give them a 1. If you're not sure, 1.5. If you want a rubric that will help you with the score, you go to this tab called Risk Definitions. And I've given you a basic rubric that it's an unprotected sheet, meaning you can change this anytime you want. So, example, criticality to operations. The question you ask of your cross-functional team is, how critical is this supplier in running our operations? I've been very careful telling my cross-functional team is, do not give them a score on how critical they are to your category. No, it should be how critical they are to the company. That's a very different thing, okay? All right. So low means, yeah, they can disappear and we'll still run because we got spares or we've got replacements. Or no, if they stop, we stop also. Right. So this rubric is yours. Okay? And then for that, I saw that somebody liked that overlay. It's here also on this tool. So you got your 4 boxes, you got your strategies, you got your levers, and you got your tactics. Okay, they're all out. I'm essentially giving a bootleg copy of the purchasing chessboard on this tool. Okay, and there are formulas in here, there are macros. As you're entering the scores, you will see in real time what their segmentation is, also what their tiers are. So you'll see which ones are strategic, when and which ones are, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And the final cherry on top is you get it plotted on a nice little chart which you print on paper, or you copy it to PowerPoint and show it to your boss. So there you go. And then you have some, basic functionality here to change the midpoint, right? If you want to, or change the minimum point. It's a tool, but the default numbers are good already, and it's automatic. It will assess the highest spend over here, and automatically put that as the max. It will look at the minimum spend. It knows which supplier has the minimum spend, and you have the option to make that the left axis. Anyway, this tool, believe it or not, is about 10 years old, but I still use it today because there's nothing like it. It's actually it's a difficult thing to build from scratch, really, because this requires advanced Excel knowledge. Something like this isn't even easy in Power BI. It's difficult actually to do something like this, but I spent time. I did it. I used it in multiple companies. I use it in teaching for this course for SCC, and now it's all yours. I will give you a copy of this so you can play around with it. And yeah, I'm doing this currently right now in the company I work for, and we've proven that for a category, all right, most recently we did it for our logistics category, 50 vendors in 30 minutes. It's not hard, just don't overthink it. Okay, you can fine tune later, but the top 50 was done in half an hour. And they said, wow, that was really easy. And then we expanded it to all their vendors. For logistics, it's about 150 vendors only, rail cars and stuff like that. But now they have a clear picture, and they themselves, the director of logistics, was so surprised to say, wow, I didn't think that we'd have that many surety of supply vendors. And yeah. These strategic suppliers are truly strategic, but wow, we're pretty high risk, and we should be careful about these things. Okay, Melanie has a question. I see your hand raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just trying to look at this and trying to just think about it, because like in my position, I've been given 5 categories. So let's say one of the categories is printer suppliers, Yeah. Sorry, it looks like I'm echoing. With oh, that's annoying. Sorry. I'll just put my question in the chat because it's echoing back to me. I don't know if it's echoing back to you guys.
It's okay with me.
Yes, it was.
Oh, okay. But say like you have you know what? I'm just gonna.
I think one way to help it is Ian, if you put yourself on mute while Melanie asks her question, it might help as well.
Okay. So this is a test. Okay, that worked. So when I look at this, like I'm trying to think of like if we were to use this tool for like one specific category, like how would you kind of assess this? Because your risk for one category with, say 5 different suppliers, spend will vary, but your risk and all of the other data would be the same. And that's kind of the situation I'm facing. Like it's kind of, the supplier part isn't making sense to me in this. I would like to use it for assessing one category. How would you do this for one category? Because your risk for every supplier will be the same.
Okay, so my answer to this is one exercise per category. You will assess all your vendors in a category the same way. You're right. All of these risks apply to all the suppliers in that category, but spends are all different. You will eventually spread them out on the logic matrix. What you cannot do is put many suppliers from different categories into one sheet. That's wrong. So you're responsible for 5 categories. You do this 5 times with the top vendors of each category. If you have time, you can do it for all, but at least I would recommend the top 50 or top 100 for each.
But your risk matrix would pretty much be the same for all the suppliers, because all the suppliers.
Not necessarily. Your service categories will have very different makeup of risk. Some of these weights will be heavier towards, safe, anything this people related, and material, and maybe some of this might be even 0. 0% weighting for certain material categories. So the risk areas are pretty much same for all, but the weightings will be different. And you know what? This is, again, an unprotected sheet. If you don't like the words unique technology, you can change this. You can change this to, this is a recommendation of 7 risk areas. You can modify it if you want to risk areas that are relevant to your company. But I believe that even though the risk areas are the same, the weightings will be different. And of course, your spend will be different. We'll still end up with something like this. And of course, you know, how risk applies to your top supplier will be very different from how it applies to your low spend guys in the same category, right? Did that make sense? For example, give me, Melanie, an example of a materials category that you're thinking of.
Printers.
Okay, so how many kinds of printers? Are we talking about the service of printing, like the machine printer?
Leased printer. So it's a Xerox versus Konica versus Ricoh.
Okay, so you have some printers, some suppliers that provide the machine itself, right? So the Xerox printer. And you also might have suppliers that provide only the ink or only a part of it, right? And maybe there are many of them. Okay, so the risk of losing maybe the ones that provide the printers themselves should be higher than those that provide the spare parts for it. So same risk areas, you will score them differently, really.
Maybe I can offer something up here as well, Melanie. Remember the outcome of this, what you want to get out of this is how does this information help shape the strategy, the sourcing strategy, the approach on sourcing that category and in managing that category, right? And think of the tool as a means for you to, like a microscope, zoom in and zoom out based on the spend in your organization. So, you know, if you feel that printers is too narrow, then you can actually zoom up. So one approach is to zoom in. What Ian suggested there is, okay, take printing services or printing equipment, and you can break that down into the detail, into the various parts of a printer and whatnot. But if that makes sense, do so. But if it doesn't make sense, then maybe think about the other way and say, okay, well, I'm going to zoom back a little bit, and rather than just looking at printers, should I look at the categories of equipment, right? And so within the categories of equipment, you would have printers and some of the other equipment that your organization procures, in which they can be lumped. There's some common characteristics that they have together. And then this then allows you to differentiate and segment and say, okay, well, you know, the way that I look at one particular group would be different than another group. And so just use a tool as a means to zoom in and zoom out as appropriate, but always think to what's the purpose? Like, why are we doing all this? So that if we look at all of our spend, sometimes it gets, there's a lot there, right? It's like, okay, how do I deal with all this spend? And this is a way for you to work through and say, I'm going to break this down in a logical way, allow me to prioritize, allow me to understand the various categories, and then start developing the appropriate tactics and strategy to address that particular category. And it's all going to be part around, how do I define my categories, right? It's going to be interesting around, you know, if you can maybe even speak, Melanie, around how did your organization come up with the category of printers in the first place, right? And so what were some of the thoughts that went into developing those categories? And is a process in developing the category one that allows you to manage those categories effectively?
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, thoughts on segmentation and tiering in general? Or on the tool if you want. Turn on my camera now, because this is the end of the presentation. It's Q&A time. So and now's your chance.
Yeah, I'll just offer a comment. Oh, I'm getting echo now. Great to go through this and discuss it. Great to hear you again, Alan, too. So great discussion. I think Melanie offers some real life practical challenges with segmentation. You can often get clusters of suppliers that look and feel similar because they're in a category. But you can get different ways of, when you look at the segmentation, you get to truly understand how they might be very similar or kind of synchronous, geographically similar, product similar. But when you get into the analytics, you can start to understand some of the differences between them. And I like Alan's point about zooming in a category or kind of helicopter view out. To find what level you need to start your analysis and discover those things that separate and make them different, and how those differences either play into a risk or play into an advantage or a value piece. But I love the tool you put together here. This is great.
It's my pleasure to share it with all of you. I know it has helped several students in the past. And the fact that I've been using it for about 10 years now really goes to show that category management is still relevant. The same tool for 10 years is still being used.
Ian, I have a question about if you have a really large supplier and they do multiple services for you. So for instance, a desktop management supplier, they're going to supply all the laptops and monitors. They're going to be your help desk. They're going to do professional services to get various parts of your business set up for computing. Would you then segment within that supplier? Would you then segment different parts of the businesses that they're doing for you, and then and approach it that way, or was that something you wouldn't do?
That's a really good question, Warren. Okay, so remember the purpose of segmentation and tiering. Okay, it's not about reporting what they provide to us, but this is a template for how they're going to be managed. Okay, so now you ask yourself, of this super supplier, do they have 4 different contracts with us and managed by 4 different teams, or they're just a big conglomerate that provides 4 different things, but only one contract with them? Okay,
it's one master contract. Yeah.
One master contract, then they're just one supplier on one exercise. I would not use if they provide 4 different things, I wouldn't put them in 4 different segmentation maps, because this is about relationship. You don't want to have different people doing supplier relationship with the same vendor, and the fact that you only have one master agreement with them tells me that there's only one team managing this vendor. So they only should appear once on segmentation. Now, there's another thing about super high spend, okay? And no one's asked this one yet. What if in your list of suppliers, you only have, let's say you have 100 suppliers, the first 2 or 3 have spent so large that it dwarfs everyone else, okay? What I would do in that is I would separate them out, because they're outliers. That's true outliers. You don't want them skewing the whole thing. Just automatically make them strategic or tactical. You can just evaluate them on their own, these top 3, and then whatever remains, that's what you do segmentation on. Okay, it's a real problem, because you will probably, especially if you're in a large company, you might have a few categories where most of your spend, 90% of your spend, is with 5 vendors only. Even though there are 300 vendors in there, it's mostly with a few. Take them out, okay? Just do it manually on those top 5. Or you'll have a very weird looking segmentation chart where everyone is touching the vertical axis because their spend is so low.
Great, thank you.
Hey, Alan, does this go on to 12:30 or have I exceeded? It only goes up to 12. It's 12:30.
I'm not sure actually. I would leave that to you because you're the instructor.
That's true. I thought it would be until 12:30, so let's just. I have no more material for this morning, so let's.
Yeah, schedule is till 12:30, but yeah.
Oh, good. Okay. The question from Lee. Go ahead.
Oh, hi, Ian. Really enjoying your presentation. I have a question about one particular slide. I believe it has a sidebar that outlining the, the process of calculating the workload allocation. So.
Oh yeah. Let me bring that.
Yeah, I'm just curious, what kind of software or tool you utilized for that calculation. And also, will you be able to share that with us as part of your template?
Are you talking about the FTE calculator?
Yes.
Okay, I built this software. It's an Excel file. I'll have to look for it, but if I find it, I have no issue sharing it with you.
Perfect. Appreciate that.
Okay. It might actually be embedded here. That the notes, press escape or leave presentation to use the calculator. This might actually be working. Let's see if it's working on this one. Okay, hold on. No, here it's just a picture. But this tells me that in an older presentation, this was actually working. Anyway, I know this file. I mean, it's got my design signature on it. This is my file. It basically tells you how many suppliers each person can manage. Oh, sorry, the team can manage. The team. I remember I created this because there was a question from senior management as to should we create more boxes for people? Should we hire more externals and get people to join category management, or can our workforce handle the demand? Yeah, no surprise. The outcome of that was, yeah, we sorely need people because we've got thousands of vendors and we only have 50 people in category management. It usually is the case.
Ian, what are the inputs for that? Is it just the number of suppliers, or what are you actually inputting to get the number of FTEs?
This is it. The all white cells here are the input. You enter how many suppliers, okay? How many hours in a year is reasonable for an FTE to be working? So obviously this is not because you take into consideration vacation, stuff like that. What's the team size, right? That calculates, all right, in a team of 4 times 1,700, that's 6,800 hours a category management team can work on something, all right? And you also say how long it takes to complete a sourcing initiative, because category management is managing sourcing too, right? So the average is 3 months to get the contract or something. And then how many sourcing initiatives do you think you'll have in that year? So we've got set out in the beginning of the year how many plans you have. So okay, I'm planning six sourcing initiatives this year. And then you also input how many days you're going to do your scorecarding with your supplier. So 12 days a year. And, so it's like once a month, right? So it says there's some math built into it. And if I can find this file, the formulas will all be there. So yeah, the 4 FTEs can manage 41 suppliers. So 16% of the total. Out of the 250 vendors, you can only really manage just 41.
Yeah, and again, use some judgment in using the tool, right? And much of this is based on Ian's professional experience and working, and so you're going to see that it may vary from one organization to the next based on the size of that organization, the complexity of that organization, the maturity of that organization when it comes to its procurement and supply chain department, and its relationship with the business as well. So as soon as let's just say you start laying in, okay, it's a large company, it's super complex, supply chain is not mature at all, you don't have competent and trained staff, and there's not a strong relationship with the business unit, the effort to complete a sourcing initiative may take more than the average of 3 months, right? And so just kind of adjust that to what would work best for your organization.
I'll do my best, Lee, to find this. Now that we're talking about it, I realize how important this could be. Actually, it's like goal setting, right? What's realistic for a team to achieve in a year? Did anyone learn anything new about category management? I hope you did. Yes, Trisha, go ahead.
Hi, Ian. Yeah, I don't category management and category management and strategic sourcing is not an area I have a great deal of experience in. So this entire presentation has been really eye-opening and helpful for me. It really ties in a lot of the work that we've done through the SCMP courses and kind of really, elevates that for me. So thank you for a really informative session. I'm really excited to see more on the strategic sourcing next week and over the coming weekends. So thank you.
You're very welcome. In category management, I'm giving you guys 2 tools. Well, if I find the FTE calculator, that would be 3 tools I'm giving to you. No guarantees because I know it's pretty old, but if I can find, great. For strategic sourcing, I'm going to give you more tools, and that's fun. Carolyn says the ROSMA calculation was new to me. Personally, Carolyn, I only encountered ROSMA a few years ago, but I thought to myself when I saw it and how all-encompassing it is, I was asking myself, why aren't we measuring this? This is the best metric of all. It justifies the existence of supply chain organization. So yeah.
Totally agree.
If you want the exact factors, I have the equation somewhere. But yeah, it's like things in the numerator and the denominator are all the cost it is to maintain a supply chain department.
I would love to see that. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. I'm actually developing a supply chain management dashboard right now for CPO. It's going to have ROSMA on it. Charing says he understood the value of strategy, but it's new to him to how you about forming it, implementing it, and managing it. I'm glad I could talk about that. And yeah, not a lot of people realize that strategy, you have to think beyond the walls of your company. You have to look at the external. You have to form relationships with people in the business and finance. It's not something that's commonly done in traditional purchasing departments.
Yeah, I mean, we go over the theory of it in the SCMP program, but you actually don't really kind of go over how about implementing it.
Yeah.
So that was a great showing it today.
The medium-sized company I work for right now, they're currently implementing the 7 steps of strategic sourcing. Part of the 7 steps is developing a category profile or strategy. And so far, everyone's agreeing that, yeah, these steps, these PEST SWOT, and the analysis of spend is now a requirement for all kinds of sourcing. Doesn't have to be too detailed for everyone, but you have to prove that you've actually done it. And Yelena loves the category management process flow. I had a lot of fun creating those slides. Let's see if they'll animate properly now, because I worked so hard on animation of that.
Yeah, that was great.
It didn't show up properly a while ago. Let's see if I can make it work now. Okay, here goes. Yeah, okay, it animates a little better now. I'm building a house over here, and then this will morph into the process flow. Yeah, okay, now it's working. I'm teaching, by the way, a PowerPoint course, and a good chunk of it is how to use animation for proving something like this. How to use PowerPoint for data storytelling, actually. I found process diagrams, flowcharts. They're great storytelling tools, but it's actually difficult to present it, especially there's lots of things. So you animate it, right? And, I'm just a data nerd. I love making things like this. So yeah, for the comment. Let's see. Question: is there any template / model of how to and present a sorting strategy effectively? Oh, how to present the sorting strategy. I don't have it. I don't have a template. It is up to you how to convince your leaders that this sourcing strategy is the right approach. But I'm sure a good one that will be well received by your leaders is one you can prove you did your due diligence, where you've chosen this competitive bidding because of, one, they're it's a tactical category. 2, you've done the market analysis and there are lots of substitutes, that sort of thing. But I don't actually have a Word document template for that.
Yeah. Another way to show it too, Ian, and I don't, sorry, I didn't join the beginning of your session, but I know in previous sessions that you've taught, there was this concept of the value iceberg that we shared, and oftentimes, procurement organizations that are further left on the maturity curve, they're mostly focused on, the PO transaction and the cost savings on a price basis, right? And I love that illustration. And if Ian, you didn't show it here, maybe it's something that we can share in a second class, is to bring back to leadership and to the business around what is a total value that a strategic supply chain organization can contribute, and it's beyond just the price. It's looking at all aspects, including the risk and the cost avoidance and impacts to operational reliability and so on and so forth, right? And it's all of that those type of value that we're trying to seek, that Ian's work here around category management is trying to surface, so that you can chase that value and bring that value back into the company for its competitive advantage.
Share an anecdote right now, true story, because it's happening right now in my company. So a very senior leader says that we should extend payment terms to all our suppliers, right? What used to be net 30 will now be net 60. We'll do it, everyone. I want a blanket email sent out to all of them. And he just did that because, the boss, and he wants, the intention's good. We need to save money, bring down costs, and one way of is extending payment terms. But then a few people said that, wait a minute, that might work for most of our suppliers, but I'm sure we'll get into a lot of legal issues, or if not legal issues, supply disruptions if we anger the wrong suppliers. And this is why I said I recently included this with our logistics category, and almost all of their suppliers were either surety of supply or strategic, which at first I thought was weird because most of them should be transactional. But the more I looked at it, no, right, for this category is unique. The business will stop if we lose our rail cars and our logistics. We cannot get our product to our customers, to our clients. The lights go out. So I agree with the extremely high risk they're given, and it takes over a year to negotiate brand new lease on rail cars. So are we really going to send that email to these suppliers? And the resounding answer is no, we do not. And that would not have surfaced if we did not do segmentation and tiering. It only came out graphically because people, the gut feel. The people in logistics had a gut feel that there's something wrong, there's something not right with that strategy. But now with a picture to show that, look at how high the risk is, and they use the risk is so that we'd be doing the proverbial shooting ourselves in the foot if we just told all of these critical suppliers that, guess what, our payments are increasing now, and take it or leave it, right? Because that's kind of what it is sounding like. So, yeah, I mean, this exercise might have saved us millions of dollars. I can never prove it, but at least we have something to go by. I did also add, in category management theory, when you're just, playing on commercial rates, negotiating this and that, and payment terms, even if you've been doing this for decades, you're not going to get that much value out of it because you simply cannot drive your suppliers to bankruptcy. You cannot negotiate them out of the business. They have to still have a healthy amount of profit to continue being your supplier. So negotiation can only take you so far. Payment terms, you save money on the interest that from holding your money a little longer, but that isn't much because you'll still pay them. You're just holding your money a little longer. So how can we get more value out of this? Well, up until that point, everyone was saying the word savings, savings, savings. We need cost savings as number one priority. Now I think that this isn't really category management if all you're talking about is savings. So I kind of introduced slowly the concept of, let's talk about value this time, right? Yeah, you can get cost savings with the negotiation stuff, but if you want cost avoidances, if you want greater efficiencies and the creation of real measurable value, you got to think more, risk and supplier relationship management, mutual growth, these things that the Kraljic matrix will tell you. Studies have shown that you'll get way more than just negotiation, especially when you're collaboratively working on creative ways to do the same work at lower costs or with new technology. You could have 30% value creation. That's real. It has happened. This is not a new concept. I am, as you can tell, I'm very passionate. I'm a believer of category management, even if it is difficult to implement, even if it's not for everyone. For those of you that want to take that leap of faith, right? As long as you do it right and you know what it's for, you should see value that you would have never thought was possible when you were in those days that you're only thinking about commercial rates. Question: how all this can be articulated in public institutions where the goals are quite different from private organizations? I think you can still do this in public, right? So what do you mean by the goals are quite different? So it's not about savings. Is it about like relationship stuff? And can you please elaborate? Olimatu?
Yes. Hi, everybody. Yeah, I was thinking about the policies that can be a frame like to all what we want to implement in terms of category management. When we have to do, like, for example, public procurement, sometimes we are not allowed to maybe do certain sort of classifications, or maybe even the supplier management is not as enforced as in some private organization. Like, it's not given a certain importance in maybe public institutions. So that's what I'm asking. How can this fit into public institutions?
You want to take that one? That's a good question.
Yeah, I'm fiercely typing to respond to that question. So it's a wonderful question, and so we're seeing implementation of category management in various public procurement organizations, to be honest, the adoption of category management has been slower with public procurement than it has been on the private side. And we're seeing, certainly, examples of the city of Calgary implementing category management and doing the training right now. I know city of Edmonton, we may have a participant here from the city of Edmonton. In speaking with Sohrab, the CPO at the city of Edmonton, they're contemplating the adoption of category management as well. And a note here from Warren, I'm in BC Healthcare under the provincial government, and our procurement team has recently renamed category management. And so one of the easiest things for public procurement or any organizations to do is just to change a name to category management. But then the hard work behind all that is okay, how do you make this work? And in public procurement, it is taking many of the same foundational concepts, but then adopting it for public procurement. And so the risk profile in public procurement may look very different than the risk profile in the private sector, right? And so all of those things, if you can identify sort of what are your constraints in a public procurement world that you need to consider in as you develop these strategies, that becomes another input, and it's another level of filtering and assessing so that those strategies make sense for you, right? Also, like when you talk about, well, there's limitations in how we manage a group of suppliers in public procurement versus private, I would say, okay, well, what are those differences? And to challenge yourself on whether those differences should be there or not, and to the extent that those differences ought to be there, then this would then reflect also into your strategy and how you assess and how you manage that supplier. It just becomes another constraint, if that makes sense. Thanks, Chris, for saying that. So Chris indicated that the city of Edmonton has been trying to make category management work, but it's been year-long struggle, and it, it's Chris, you're not alone. In speaking with Amit at the city of Calgary, he switched the name over. He did the same thing, and they're struggling with it as well. It's challenging, right? Especially when you move from if again, Ian, I'm not sure whether you share that maturity maturity scale and going from left to right, from that tactical procurement, and as organizations mature, we often see sometimes the desire to go from a tactical procurement organization to one of category management. When you do that big jump, it is a humongous effort required to go there, because you're basically trying to go from crawling to trying to sprint, and that comes with its challenges as well.
I did show something to that effect, Alan. It's more like the requirements and skills for each of the phases of maturity, from traditional, transactional, all the way to world-class category management. And I even presented the results of when I did this in the past, and that even people who belong to category management departments, they only scored 5 to 15%, which is shockingly low. But if you think about it, yeah, a lot of people think managing categories equals category management. It really isn't.
No. You're right, and if you think about the things that Ian walked you through this morning, right, and the foundational piece, like aside from the templates and everything, think about the foundational piece around systems, processes, people, around talent and skills and whatnot. There's the other component around culture and an organizational mindset, and relationship between the procurement department with its business, right? All of those pieces are part of the overall system that allows you to achieve the success you need in category management. And where if you go through and assess your organization against, you know, those areas within the systems, and the maturity is quite low across the system, the ability for category management to be successful will be quite limited. There's going to be a lot of challenges around that, right? And so many of the things that we do, and Ian has worked with us in the past, is to assess, you know, where are you at, and what are the foundational pieces that you need to have in order to be successful. And if you don't have those foundational pieces, what do you need to do first, right? And do, you know, so that you can be ready for category management. I love Carolyn's point there, that Carolyn says, I feel that category management is more important to the public sector. We are constantly called on to prove that money is being spent with care and due diligence. It's funny, you know, I had a really long conversation with Tiago, who is a director over at Alberta Health Services. Last night, we chatted for almost 2 hours over the phone, and he was talking about the challenges in healthcare, and you know, the constant pressure around, you know, are we, as you all know, the cost of healthcare is going up. It hasn't gone down. You layer on top of that all of the inflationary pressures that we've been experiencing over the last, you know, couple of years after the pandemic. And then interesting enough, for those of you in the public sector, the disruption that occurs with the changing government as well, right? And different administrators and stuff like that, right? And the constant public scrutiny around, okay, are we spending wisely, right? And so this is an opportunity truly for supply chain professionals to lead the discussion in engaging with others within, in this case, you know, AHS, Alberta Health Services, around what are some other aspects? How do we constantly create value? And is value going beyond simply just price? Because in the framework of Alberta Health Services, there's so much that goes into, you know, the efficacy of a product or the services in improving the health of Albertans in the case of AHS, right? And there's so much complexity around that, and really what category management offers is the ability to understanding those complexity, putting value around that, and then putting the right approach to not only sourcing that, but also managing that category as well. Lee made a comment in here, based on my experience in category management, my observation is that there may be times when there is an excessive amount of documentation and paperwork. Consequently, a significant amount of time is merely spent on filing our paperwork for the sake of doing so without effectively utilizing limited resources. And that's so true, right? And so that's something that you definitely want to be wary of. And so as soon as you're doing things for the sake of doing something, and it's not adding value to me, that's a waste activity, and actually it contributes to the costs of an organization. Izumi mentions in here, is it possible that businesses, including public sector organizations, struggle with the transition to category management because they don't realize that they are already doing a lot or everything associated with category management, using category management terminology, i.e. transition may not be that great and may more require identifying everything they already do related to category management and then focusing just on what they need to add. I think what I gather out of that that note there is and feel free to jump into this as well, Ian, is that it's really important when you embark on the category management journey is to recognize where you are today. Assessing your skills, assessing your organization, processes, systems, and so what is a current state? And then being very, very open and articulate and specific in defining what is that future state and doing that proper gap analysis, right? In the absence of that, you're absolutely right. Organizations may fall into, reinventing the wheel and not leveraging existing capabilities and competencies to allow you to move up that maturity, that maturity curve more efficiently. Would you agree with that statement, Ian?
100%.
Okay. Hey, we're reaching. Well, we went past our time. How did that time go by so fast?
I love the subject so much, time just passes.
Yeah, Ian, thank you so much for your delivery this morning. I'm hoping that everyone took a lot of value from it. And I do want to express my gratitude to all of you in spending your valuable weekend in joining us here today and just sharing and learning and contributing all of your questions and input and making this event a lot more engaging. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Looking forward
See you
to
next
seeing you all
class.
next Saturday.
Yeah, thanks, Alan.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, everyone.
Ian. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.